sixth session of the Bellingham City Council. And Bellingham City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Meetings Act. We have one announcement. There will be a public hearing on June 20th, 2016 at 7 p.m. in council chambers to afford an equal opportunity for the expression of views regarding a resolution in support of Initiative 1433. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
April Barker.
Here.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Gene Knutson.
Here.
Michael Lillquist.
Here.
Roxanne Murphy excused. Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Terry Borneman.
Here.
Thank you. So this evening we're actually going to start with our public hearings. If you have signed up for public comment period, note that that will be moved to the end of our public hearings. This is actually now our new standard procedure. We decided this in our retreat, so just know in future that we're going to move through our public hearings. So our first public hearing this evening is a public hearing regarding the Transportation Benefit District and funding location in the 2017-2022 six-year Transportation Improvement Program. So first we're going to start with a presentation from Ted Carlson, our Public Works Director. And just before we moved into the public hearing, I just wanted to remind everyone that we do want to provide a safe, civil environment for everyone here. So no clapping or no jeers. Everybody gets to say what they came to say. So, and again, I'm going to keep us all on the 3-minute timeline because we have 3 hearings this evening. So to get through them all, we're all going to have to be as concise as we possibly can be. So I'll turn it over to you, Ted.
Thank you. Good evening. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department, along with Chad Schulhauser, the Public Works City Engineer. As Council President Vargas mentioned, this is a public hearing as required under the material change policy of the Transportation Benefit District. We had a work session at your previous meeting, but I wanted to give just a brief staff report before the public hearing, but I will try to keep it brief. As you know, the voter-approved Transportation Benefit District, which is 0.2% sales tax, which we established in 2010. Since that establishment of the TBD, the funding has been allocated equally among 3 projects on the 6-year TIP, 1/3 going to each of those projects. The projects are the arterial resurfacing program, the non-motorized projects, and the last one is the transit enhancements, where primarily the city funded Sunday service as well as a few other service enhancements through WTA. At this point, the service contract with WTA is set to expire at the end of 2016. That's a contract where the TBD funds those enhanced service options. And there does not seem to be any plan to extend it. The City Council is not looking at extending that contract, nor is the WTA board. So that brings the question of what do we do with that 1/3 of the TBD funds that have previously been allocated for service transit or transit services. In the past, when we had any money above the service contract that was part of the 1/3 transit, we used that money to fund capital projects that provided service to transit, enhanced transit options, which were things like building sidewalk, crosswalks to get people to bus shelters, making turning improvements at intersections to allow transit to stay on time and keep to their routes in a more efficient manner. And that is what the WTA board has requested that we do, that we take that 1/3 that has been allocated to transit and fund transit-related capital projects such as the ones I just mentioned. Staff, looking at the capital projects that we have on all of our plans, is making a recommendation that we make a change to the allocation and that we split the TBD funding between just 2 projects, the arterial resurfacing and the non-motorized projects. The reason we're proposing that is to provide a little bit more flexibility with the funding to put it towards whatever the highest priority might be. And we also believe that doing that will still allow the city to work with WTA and build projects that do help transit and provide easier access for folks to transit. when we adopted the pedestrian master plan, one of the criteria that was used for prioritizing projects was ease of access to transit. So projects like crosswalks and sidewalks that made it easier for riders to get to transit stops were given a higher priority. We also oftentimes, as part of our arterial resurfacing project, pave bus pullouts or make improvements to bus pullouts to make those function better and provide easier access to transit. So we believe by using just the two projects, the broader categories of projects, the arterial resurfacing and the non-motorized projects, we'll be able to put that funding towards whatever the City Council determines to be the highest priority within those two categories. And we also believe that will likely provide some benefit to transit. So that's what our recommendation is. The TBD generally brings in around $5 million a year. We would propose to split that $5 million between the two projects rather than the third. So that is what's being proposed in this year's draft 6-year transportation improvement program, which you will consider as part of your next public hearing. We've been working with WTA on this. They're very much aware of what the staff and the administration are proposing. You heard from Pete Stark, the general manager of WTA, and I'm not sure whether they'll speak again tonight, but you heard from them at our last work session. And they do have some projects that they would like to use TBD funding on in the future. A couple that they've noted primarily would be the improvements to the downtown transit station. That's something that they don't believe they'll be working on in the next biennium. So it would be a request perhaps in the 1920 budget process. And we believe that's something that the council could consider at that point. Any action tonight to go to, or at the next meeting to go to just the two projects would not preclude taking action in the future to fund WTA projects. The material change policy that was adopted by, at the time, the Transportation Benefit District Board was a requirement of state law. If you implement a Transportation Benefit District, you do have to have a policy and a process for changing the projects. When the voters voted to approve the Transportation Benefit District, it was clear in the process that they were voting to fund 3 projects: the arterial resurfacing, the non-motorized, and the transit enhancement. Most folks associated the transit enhancement with Sunday service at the time. But because there's certainly an understanding that over a 10-year period, which is the period that the Transportation Benefit District funding is in place, that projects will change, that the public interest will change, and so the RCWs, the state law, created a process for the legislative body to consider changing those projects, and that's what we're here to do tonight. It requires a public hearing, so I'm about ready to finish up. Be happy to answer questions. Council President will open up for a public hearing. Our intention would be to come back to the council at your next meeting as part of a work session, and at that time bring forward a resolution that would propose making the change that the council would consider and either approve or not approve. So that's the process moving forward, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Yeah.
Do we want to wait until after the public hearing, or do you have a couple
Well, I have a
quick
question
questions?
that might be related to it, because I don't know. I had heard this week, and I hope I'm wrong, but that WTA was considering cutting one of the routes for Sunday services that had been. And do you know anything about that?
I've not heard that. We've been a part of their strategic planning process, and I might ask Chris to weigh in. Chris Como has been our representative. My understanding is that there is no decision to cut Sunday service, but I can't speak with absolute certainty on that.
Okay. It took me by surprise.
Councilmember Lundquist.
If we do agree to a 50-50 split, in terms of financial accounting, is there any money left over in the transit portion? What would happen to that residual balance? I say it again. Sorry, Ted.
In the Transportation Benefit District fund at this point?
Yeah, we separated it accounting-wise in thirds. Will there be residual third under this proposal? What would happen to any residual, or is there no residual?
Yeah, at this point, there really isn't any residual in that 1/3 transit. You'll recall last year we funded or partially funded the Bellis Fair Parkway sidewalk and crosswalk improvements to provide easier access to the WTA transit stop on Bellis Fair Parkway. That, along with the contract, the service contract that's expiring at the end of the year, for the most part, takes up the entire $1.5 million.
Anyone else? Okay, well, let's get started with our public hearing, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm probably going to say some of your names wrong. So we're going to start with Deborah Middow, Jeff Meadow, maybe? Meadow, okay, all right, it's spelled a little different here. Greg Huffenbacher, Jane Bright are our first four. And I'm going to give you a little 30-second notice so that you know that you're... And if you could please state your name for the record. We don't need your address unless you'd like to share, but you can state your name.
Deborah Middaugh, South Hill. And I'd like to speak in favor of the tip going towards railroad safety. And I think it's something that we...
Sorry. So I believe our tip is
That's the following item.
okay. She said the one on the top, but it says tip on it, but both of these do. Marie? Both of these see tip.
I know.
Okay, all right. All right, Deborah, if we're going to actually got our list confused here, so I apologize, but we're going to move to the other public hearing list. I apologize, these sheets, we got a little out of order, so that's what happens when I have 3 public hearings. It's the stress. So if I apologize for that, that is our next hearing, so we'll start all over again. Thanks for playing. Let's go back to our public hearing regarding the Transportation Benefit District TBD funding allocation. And our first names are Lori Province, Peter Stark, Betsy Perno, and Bob Marshall, and then Jamie Donaldson. And those are the last names that I have on the list. If you could please come down. Again, apologies for making everyone go up and down those stairs.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lori Province. I live at 2501 West Street, Bellingham, in the Columbia neighborhood. I am here because I asked you to consider that there is a potential risk side of moving the Transportation Benefit District to cover only 2 categories rather than the 3 it was initially funded to deal with. I've been ill. I'm not able to bicycle anymore, but transit is in my future. And as we age, more of us are going to be in need. In looking at the staff letter, I think which came out prior to your work session recommending this change, one of the things that I think was missed was the fact that the Transportation Benefit District, besides being advertised and voted on as a 3-part system, and thanks to the checks and balances that require a hearing like this, should there be any desire to change, represents some particularly flexible dollars. Many dollars come to you for expenditure that have very specific strings attached to them. You have to do this with it, you can't do that. And I think that the ability to use that money for things such as transit enhancement, paying for Sunday service, paying for improvements for your transit centers, either at Bellis Fair or at Cordata or perhaps potentially downtown, will be very important in the near future. I also ask you to consider that in the long-range planning, because economics and long-range planning don't always go hand in hand, that the Albertsons closure, which has made my neighborhood kind of a food desert, may necessitate some changes in transit options so that people have an opportunity to get to an actual grocery store. So I think that while I'm sure staff has looked at it thoroughly, it's not it's not a great gob of money, but $1.5 million is definitely an amount of money
30
that
seconds.
can attract and leverage other dollars to it so that we can be a little bit more nimble in response to economic issues that happen in our town. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lori. She set a great tone. Look at that, under 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council. Pete Stark, General Manager, Whatcom Transportation Authority, business address of 4111 Bakerview Road. Well, first of all, thanks for your support the last 5 years, going on 6 years for the TBD and Sunday funding. It's been instrumental in preserving transit service in Bellingham. We gave over 1.5 million rides with this money. At this point, the position of our board and the city is in Concord. We don't need the operating support to provide Sunday service anymore. In fact, we're looking at a service expansion of about 10% that we're going to be introducing to our board in about 2 weeks. It will include almost all of the existing Sunday service. We have minor elements that we're looking at. For example, how we connect the university to the train station on Saturday and Sunday evenings. We currently do that on 32nd and down Fairhaven Parkway. We want to connect the college directly instead. So there'll be minor changes in current Sunday service, but will be significant enhancements in Sunday service countywide. Moving on, the current proposal for the TIP, we support many items that are in the TIP, and we support that there's a key interest that we share in the city's complete networks approach to streets, meaning that the roadway, the bikes, the pedestrians, the transit and freight movement are all considered part of a network. We've had a great recent success with Alabama Street. We see another one coming up funded through the TIP and the TBD money on West Maplewood in the 2017 budget. However, we still have needs that aren't addressed in the TIP, and therefore the TBD money can't be allocated to them yet. One that's emerging in our strategic plan is to move our service over to Telegraph Road and off the freeway, have a go line on James Street and Telegraph Road every 15 minutes. You can't walk the length of Telegraph Road safely. And so that's an element that's going to need to get addressed either through developer fees or street improvements in the near future. There's hundreds of new apartment units over there, and that's where we need service. Secondarily, you've heard Bellingham Station mentioned. We have 10 gates and 10 buses in the station at 2 of our 4 pulses per hour. So we can't explain, we have limited ability to expand service out of that station. For example, to serve the waterfront, there's a project in the TIP on Granary Avenue to start development down there. We won't be able to provide bus service down there without an initial gate. So as you consider the ordinance, I'd suggest you direct staff to provide some flexibility for transit funding and not look at revisiting it in 2 years to preserve that flexibility now. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Betsy? I like the pace everyone's setting.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Betsy Pernato, and I live in the Birchwood neighborhood. And I am here to speak against taking the money away from public transit and dividing it between the arterial paving and non-motorized funding. And the reason that I feel that way is, first of all, I voted for that in 2011, I believe, and I worked for it also. And that vote came about as a result of a county-wide vote that turned down transit funding. And Bellingham voters supported that initial vote. I think it was in 2010. And so in 2011, City Council created the Transportation Benefit District, and we were led to believe that it was going to be used to enhance Sunday service and other kinds of bus services. I work with low-income people, and I know many of them don't have cars. They rely on transit. Many disabled people rely on transit, and there are a large number of seniors in Bellingham. Bellingham is a mecca for retirement. And personally, we bought our house and wanted it to be on a transit line because we anticipated that we would be using transit more and more as we aged. And so I feel a little bit like taking this money that was originally, when I voted for it, and I knew it was 3 things, but originally thinking that it was going to help maintain and restore transit, and saying we're not going to take the public transit out of it, it feels a little bit like bait and switch. And even if it's a small amount of money, I feel like we should be moving toward expanding transit, and I don't like the idea of cutting it out. So please leave the transit and the transportation benefit district funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Bob?
Hello, Council. My name is Bob Marshall. I live at 3112 Alderwood Avenue. My request is that you continue to use the income from the Transportation Benefit District created in 2010 to enhance public transit. What prompts me to make this request in this way was the lead story in yesterday's Bellingham Herald, that low inventory, rising prices, and a lack of lots to build new homes have almost eliminated houses for sale in the under $300,000 range. Homes in the mid-range of prices have a remarkably low inventory, dropping from 71 available houses at this time last year down to 18 listed houses under $300,000 at the moment. While this number will no doubt rise, the entire story makes it clear that the future of Bellingham is not out, but up. There are several reasons for this, but increasing density, a return to greater density, is our future. Our population is aging rapidly. How and where people earn their livings and how much they are able to earn here are all changing as well. But all of these changes are pushing us to less reliance on single-family homes on large lots and individual cars to get us to where we need to go. Increasing density means fewer cars per person, fewer cars overall in use in the city, and greater use of alternatives to the single person driving their personal automobile for every trip they take from home. The era of acres of free parking is long over in Bellingham. The entire urban village concept centers on less and less automobile traffic and more use of feet, bikes, and buses within and between these distributed centers. For those people who do have a choice, increased availability and convenience of transit increases use. Certainly I've found this in my own case. When I can take a bus to get where I need to go when I can get there, I prefer to do it, but that's not always the case. Our goal at this point in Bellingham's development must be to reduce the number of cars in the city as its density increases. Shifting funds away from transit, even for additional flexibility, and into paving is the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Jamie?
Good evening, council members. My name is Jamie Donaldson. I live in Fairhaven. I also would like to encourage you to not take the public transit funding out of the Transportation Benefit District funding. Do not do that. I think it's really important to maintain public transportation. While I choose to use public transportation for sustainability reasons, I took the bus here tonight. I know there are a lot of people who don't have that choice, particularly the disabled. A lot of students don't have cars, a lot of elderly people, and so on and so forth. And as a progressive citizenry here in Bellingham, I think we need to be always thinking of ways to increase public transportation, not restrict it, and that is for the benefit of all, even for folks who do own cars. And I have the honor of serving as the president of the board of directors of the Bellingham Food Bank. And while I am not speaking in official capacity for the food bank, it does allot me a particular vantage point. I know for certain that it is getting increasingly more difficult for clients to come to the Bellingham Food Bank using public transportation. A lot of folks, particularly in the Alderwood neighborhood, find it very onerous. They may have to take 2 buses to come to the food bank, and they can't manage to do it during our regular hours of distribution. We are not able to serve some people for lack of public transportation to the food bank. It has become such an issue that we have taken the food bank to the Alderwood neighborhood. We now have distributions of food on Thursday evenings in the Alderwood neighborhood, but now with the closing of Albertsons, I think the need for food security is going to become even more of a problem in that neighborhood. Public transportation will certainly not relieve that problem, but it will certainly help people get safely and quickly to other neighborhoods where they will be buying their groceries. So I urge you to retain the public transportation funding in this particular source. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. That is the last name I had on the list, but is there anyone else here who would care to speak at this public hearing? Again, this is for the funding allocation in the TIP. Anyone else? No? Okay, I guess I consider that complete, and we'll move on to council questions. Councilmember Lillquist.
I didn't have a question. I also serve on the WTA board. I think it's really important for the public to understand that WTA actually does not need our money for operations anymore. And WTA is actually, by a vote of the board, which was unanimous, I believe, for the board, we actually voted to expand WTA service by, I think it's $1.5 million of new service next year. And if you go online to the WTA website, there's places for you to give input on where you would like to see service enhancements. So everyone who comes out in support of WTA, that's great. WTA is back on its feet and is looking to do exactly what you're hoping for, which is to expand service, meet unmet areas and unmet needs. So I think that should be reassuring to you, and most importantly, I think you should go to the WTA website, ridewta.com, and give some feedback to WTA to help us in our strategic planning process. That was my comment.
Council members? Councilmember Hamel.
I just want to clarify, was there a downturn in revenue with the WTA as a result of the recession, and that's what brought on this need for going to voters for additional revenues? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And Pete could certainly speak to it better than I, but yeah, WTA, because they're relying on sales tax along with the rider fares, they did have a reduction in revenue. And in looking at reducing expenditures, looked at cutting the Sunday service. My understanding is not because it wasn't successful or well used, but because that was the opportunity to reduce the most expenditures by closing operations on a day, allowing them to shut down their facility. But that's exactly right, and so TBD was used to supplement their operations, primarily to restore Sunday service.
Because they went out for a levy and failed.
Yeah, because as the mayor just mentioned, WTA went out for a levy, and I believe a speaker spoke to that as well. It didn't pass countywide, but it did have strong support in the city, and that was certainly one of the driving factors for including transit service as part of the Transportation Benefit District when the city decided to go to the voters for that levy.
Councilmember Barker.
Can you explain a little better the WTA silo of funding that we're talking about, maybe taking and splitting between the two others? Why we can't just leave that and continue to use sidewalk that will connect you to there, or better pavement like along West Maplewood? Why we can't leave that and continue that process? Why do we need to split it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I touched on that a little bit in that within the non-motorized projects and the asphalt or the arterial resurfacing, we do benefit transit. West Maplewood is a good example of that. We're using non-motorized money there as well as resurfacing, and it certainly aids transit service as well. We could do that. I think we would not have quite as much flexibility. We would certainly be restricted to non-motorized projects that clearly provided enhanced access or easier access to transit. A lot of the projects fall into that category, but not all of them. And so I think by funding just the two projects, we're able to fund the highest priority non-motorized, which may be a project that serves transit, but it may also be a project on a section of street that needs sidewalk that doesn't currently have transit access. So I think it's a flexibility question. If we did not make this change, as Pete said, there's no transit projects in the next 2 years anyway. We would certainly look to fund non-motorized projects that better serve transit and resurfacing projects where we can do some improvements to bus pullouts and things of that nature. So I think it comes down to the flexibility and the ability to fund the very highest priority.
Councilmember Borneman.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to make a decision tonight on this, but I do want to say to those who testified tonight, I couldn't agree more. I wished we could continue using this money to expand routes, because we need, I feel, to get a truly usable bus system that's not just for the transit dependent. We have to have more routes available. But without the support of the WTA board and willingness to do that, us keeping the money there doesn't do a whole lot of good. So I'm not clear, and I hope maybe we can discuss it a little more when we discuss this, but I would like to see it used for additional routes, so it makes it easier for people to use the buses on a regular basis and not just You know, right now, it's still pretty much a system for transit dependent, except the GO routes. That works pretty well, but I think we need more of those to really make it an efficient system. But we need, part of that choice is, our only choice is for the money. We don't set up the routes, and so I'm willing to discuss that more, but I do agree, we need to expand it, not.
We are having a work session on this, correct?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave
No,
it at that.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Councilmember? Okay. Councilmember Lillquist.
So I don't mind the 50-50 split, but I don't mind 50 split if we make more formal. What we hear is the commitment to considering and weighing transit in prioritizing the project. So when the bicycle and pedestrian master plans projects were prioritized, and that's the list we use, an eye was given to transit. It seems to me now if we're doing this shift, I'd want more than just one eye. I'd want both eyes on transit. I'd want to look more at the prioritization to see if different projects may rise to the top now if we're weighing the transit component more heavy. So that's sort of what I would like to see. But as I understand it, to do that, this whole thing depends upon the TIP, which is the result of our next hearing. And if I wanted to change the scope or the focus or modify the scope of the focus of projects number 1 and 3, we would do it in the city's TIP document, not here in this document. Do you understand what I'm saying? If we agree to the split, the way to then affect how the split is actually carried out is actually to go over the TIP and make sure it's carried out there differently.
Yeah, that's correct. The individual projects within the broader categories of non-motorized and resurfacing to some degree are identified throughout the TIP process, starting with going to the Transportation Commission and getting their recommendation on which of the projects that generally come out of the pedestrian master plan or the bicycle master plan should be funded. Not always going in priority order 1, 2, 3, but also being opportunistic about opportunities to combine with private development or corridor projects that may be funded through other funding sources. But you're right, the TIP process that we'll be talking about next is where the projects are actually identified.
So I guess my request for our next work session really focuses on what we would do with the TIP to maybe modify the program scope there. And by doing that, we could actually help address this TBD issue, to not lose track of the transit component, maybe even emphasize the transit component to the remaining 2 project areas. That's my thinking.
I agree.
Council members, any other questions? Anyone else from the executive team? Any statements? All right, I will consider this public hearing closed. There will be no vote this evening. This will move to a work session. I'm going to assume that would be committee of the whole. Is that correct? So that will be scheduled for a later date.
Will we keep this open for written comment until then? That's many times we do that. So
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, and do we have a scheduled date so people know when that cutoff is, or we just know?
Well, we plan to come back on at your next meeting, which I believe is the 20th.
June 20th. Okay,
yes.
That's scheduled. So you have 2 weeks. If anybody wishes to submit some written public comment, that can be submitted until June 20th. So thank you very much for your participation. And we are going to move to our next public hearing. And I'll have you know that I now have the sign-up sheets tucked in beside the right. So we're all good now. So our next public hearing will be a Public Works presentation and public hearing regarding the draft 2017-22 Transportation Improvement Program. The 6-year TIP is adopted annually to plan a program planning funding toward capital improvements to Bellingham's multimodal transportation network. State law requires cities to adopt the TIP before July 1st each year. The draft 2017-2022 TIP is based on Public Works and staff recommendations. Public Works staff presented the draft TIP to the Public Works Advisory Board and the Transportation Commission on May 10th, 2016. Public Works staff will present specific funding information regarding all projects listed on the draft TIP, followed by a public hearing, which is now. Council work session to be considered the adoption of the draft 2017-22 TIP will be held June 20th, 2016. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ted Carlson, our Public Works Director.
Thank you very much. That was a very good introduction. I think with that, I'm going to turn it right over to Chris Como, our transportation planner, and he'll run through a brief presentation prior to the public hearing. Chris?
Thanks, Ted. Good evening, Council. Chris Como, Public Works. And as we all just heard through the introduction, this is our 6-year TIP, and this is the entire public process. As Council President Vargas just mentioned, we're here at the public hearing, and these are all the things that have happened up to this point. I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. The first page is just some references to resource documents. Then this is the state law, the RCW, that requires us to do this each year. As President Vargas mentioned, we have to adopt this and provide it to the state by the end of June each year. The next page is just another reference to the different funding source definitions that we use in the document. There's quite a lot of funding sources, so there's a lot of colors that refer to different funding pots. Next, we look at the geographic distribution of the projects around the city, just so people can see where we're actually spending our money and what kind of improvements we're making. Then we get to the 2016 construction page. And the reason we put this in here is just to show everybody where we're going to be actually working this summer or through the course of this year. There's been one slight change here from the draft that was posted on the city website, and that's just that when we first posted it, it wasn't completely clear that we were going to have enough funding to actually overlay Billy Frank Jr. Street, but it appears that we are now, so that's included in the overlay package. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. The other thing that's changed is we have added back in the Birchwood Avenue sidewalk, which was supposed to be done last year, but we ran into a problem with the negotiations with the property owners in terms of getting enough right-of-way to build the sidewalk. It now appears that hurdle has been cleared. We're going to move forward and try to get that built as quickly as possible. So that's also back on the list. So this is how the TIP funding sheet looked when it was posted on the website and after the when it was posted. Then we went to the Transportation Commission on May 10th, and there were some recommendations made. As we just heard through the last public hearing on the TBD, the recommendation from staff and the Transportation Commission was to remove the funding. It's shown as zeros even in the previous slide. Let me go back real quick. They're all zeros throughout here. And as you heard during the testimony, WTA does not have anything in the pipeline at this point for using the TBD transit funding. So the recommendation was to simply split it 50-50 between resurfacing and non-motorized, and I understand that there will be a decision on that later. The other thing that we may have to change, depending on how things play out, is project number 8, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the project sheets, the Cordata Stewart Roundabout. We were anticipating a little more progress working with the private development out here when we thought maybe we could get this roundabout built even as soon as 2017, but things have lagged, and we may have to either push that to 2018 or into the unfunded category if funding doesn't materialize soon. So then the next funding sheet just shows primarily the unfunded projects, but there's a couple of funded ones right at the top, and we're going to dive in and talk about each one of these individually. Here's the line item for arterial resurfacing, and one thing I just want to point out, as Ted was talking about earlier, even the resurfacing projects that we do, they do benefit pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit. We're always looking to do as much as possible. If we go resurface a street, we have to do the ADA upgrades, the curb ramps, the crosswalks, the sidewalks. We put in bike facilities whenever we can. We're always looking to do that, and as Ted mentioned, if there's an opportunity to do something for transit, we'll go ahead and do that as well. Here's the transit service enhancements. This is just the page, but it does state in here, this is post-Transportation Commission. Again, the staff and commission recommendation is to split the revenue into two. This is the non-motorized project sheet, and this actually then assumes that funding has been split between non-motorized and resurfacing, and that's why you see these funding amounts. And here's the list of the sidewalk and bicycle facility projects. Now, these are independent of other projects, so these are specifically bicycle projects like bike boulevards and crossings, or sidewalk projects, independent sidewalk projects not related to, say, a big arterial project. And then this next page actually goes into much more detail, and in this project description you can see whether the emphasis is a bike facility, but in red you can also see that each and every one of them benefits several transit routes. And the reason we're showing that is we're always looking at multimodal transportation. We want to make sure that we're providing an easy way for people to access transit, whether it's walking or biking, and getting to bus shelters and stops. Our first actual project with grant funding is the 12th Street Sidewalk and Multimodal Improvements, and this is a project that's a partnership between the city, private development, and a state grant for sidewalks. And again, we're hoping that progress is going to be made very soon on this. We're waiting for the developers to get going on their site development, and we're hopeful that this project can be completed in 2017. We were able to get a $300,000 state grant by showing that the private developers were going to go ahead and build some of the sidewalk, and then we would realign the intersection here in front of the Fairhaven Library to tee it up and make it safer, as well as expanding the sidewalk space out here. So this will be a nice big pedestrian space, and all new crosswalks and a bike boulevard connecting here on Mill Street. The next project is a very large arterial project that we've been working on for many years up in the northwestern part of town, Mahogany Avenue. Used to be Division Street. It's now called Mahogany, and it's in relation to the Arctic Avenue arterial that's being constructed by the Costco development. This project will go from Northwest Avenue all the way over to Pacific Highway. It will have the full suite of urban features, sidewalks, bike facilities, and ultimately someday in the future we'll have traffic control like signals. There's probably going to be one immediately on Northwest, but the others will come over time. This is a funded project, and it's in engineering and design and right-of-way acquisition right now, so hope to get going on that soon. The next one everybody should be fairly familiar with is our big waterfront project, Granary Laurel. The alignment now looks like this, coming off of, this is Roeder Avenue here. Granary will go east-west, and then north-south Laurel will tie into Cornwall Avenue down here. So this will provide primary access into the waterfront. In addition to this, we're looking at many design features, including a two-way cycle track on the north side of the Granary Avenue extension in conjunction with the development that's happening here at Granary. We're looking at the intersection designs right now, and hopefully that will be going to construction sometime next year, and it'll probably take a while, maybe into 2018. The next one is West Maplewood. I guess one thing I should say about that Granary is it's primarily funded by federal money, but there is some local money in it. The next one is West Maplewood. We also got a federal grant for this, for putting a sidewalk on the east side of the road. But the way we're doing that is we used our resurfacing money as local matching funds to convince the state that we could rechannelize this road and add bicycle lanes on each side when we resurface. And of course, every time we propose doing a complete street style project, they are really happy to see that. That's what everybody wants to see. So when this project is done, it'll have the full suite of urban features as well: sidewalks, bike lanes, and skinnier travel lanes. This is an old concrete street, so it'll be a much smoother ride, and it serves transit as well. Here's the Cordata Stewart roundabout. We obtained a state grant for $1.5 million. We have some local match requirements here. But again, we've been counting on private development to pay a proportional share of this project, and that amount looks around $300,000. And if we can see that happen, we can go to construction with this project, but until it's funded, we consider it an unfunded project. We may have to move it into the unfunded category if that doesn't materialize soon. We're not under any dire timeline with the state grant, but we will have to get moving on it before too long. So this one's a very important one. It also serves transit and provides an excellent crossing for pedestrians and bicyclists. Next is the Cordata Safe Route to School, again a grant from the federal government for Safe Route to School. This is the section of Aldrich Road that was annexed in 2009. It leads to Cordata Elementary School, and there are certain sections of sidewalk out here, but there are large gaps, and so this will fill the gaps and fill in the bike lane on one side of the street. We're not able to put sidewalk and bike lane on the other side of the street. That's actually the city boundary, and on the other side of that is county and county residents. Someday, if more development happens, we can maybe go look at the other side of the street again, but we're trying to get a safe route to school for kids. Interestingly, we also have a contribution here from the Bellingham School District, which is great because we always try to create partnerships between different agencies. We've had really great success with WTA, the university, and now the school district, so we're hoping that this is precedent setting and we'll see some more of that. West Horton Road is a major arterial project that's, again, in the same annexation area from 2009. It's taking the current dead end of Horton Road and extending it over to Aldrich Road. We got $2.7 million of federal money last summer. We think that this project is now fully funded. We're working through some of the design and mitigation issues right now. There was also another $500,000 of private mitigation funding put into this one from developers in North Cordata, and so we're hopeful that we can get to construction by 2018 on this one. This will definitely help the situation out here in Cordata with, here's the school right here, and there's a real lack of east-west access in this entire area of the city. So we're trying to fill these gaps for all modes. And again, while there currently isn't any transit service here because it doesn't exist, it certainly could be a future transit route as development occurs. Next is Orchard Drive, and this project has been on the tip for quite some time. I've been working on this for about 10 years, and it looks like it's now fully funded, and it's getting ready for construction, and we hope in 2018 we can build this. This is an exciting project. Everybody should be aware of the Squalicum Creek reroute. They just won the big national award. The Beta Baker Trail is now under construction. This is an arterial connection, grade separated under I-5 to connect the north central part of Bellingham with the core of Bellingham on the west side of I-5, underneath I-5 on an old railroad grade. The creek went through here as well, and there's enough room that we can get this arterial as well as the Beta Baker Trail through here. This will have a sidewalk on the north side, and it will have bike lanes on both sides, as well as the trail option. And while there's no transit here because it doesn't exist, it's certainly something that could serve transit in the future. There's definitely a lot of development happening in north central Bellingham, and this right here is just the bottom portion of an already approved project for about 500 homes in this area. We got $10 million of gas tax money for that through the Connecting Washington. So that looks like it's fully funded. Next is the West Bakerview Interstate 5 interchange improvements, and we've been working with the state on this steadily for about a year and a half through what's called an interchange justification report process. That's a mouthful, but it's what's required with the DOT and the FHWA to change access to the interstate. We don't yet know exactly what's going to happen, but in the next month, there's definitely going to be some more information about which alternatives are kind of floating to the top. We started out with a list of 17 different alternatives, whittled them down to about 5, and I think there's about 3 remaining on the list. And so there will be more information coming forth about which way we think we can go given the funding and some of the constraints out here. But it's for all sorts of things to reduce congestion, set it up for future development. There's a large annexation area over here. All the development that's happening on Bakerview, the interchange definitely needs some attention. And again, if possible, if we can somehow widen the bridge at some point in the future, that would allow us to put a sidewalk on the south side. We put a sidewalk on the north side in 2013, and if we could widen the bridge, we could get some bike facilities on there. It will also help keep WTA transit buses on time. There's already 3 routes that use this overpass, so we're looking at that as well. And we've been working. WTA is at the table with us and DOT and FHWA and all the jurisdictions around. Then we have the Railroad Quiet Zone project at Boulevard, and what we're showing here is first quarter REIT, real estate excise tax revenue, at the amount of $250,000 per year, 2017 through 2019, and that's to get this particular railroad crossing built. Then we get into some of our not quite yet funded projects, and because of that, they go into this column that's topped by the red here. This one still needs just under $2 million, but we do have federal and state money in this, and it's a roundabout project at James and Bakerview. And again, this is identified in our pedestrian master plan and our bicycle master plan. There's a transit route that goes through here. As you heard from WTA, there's not going to be transit going through here, but they're talking about switching the Gold Go line to James and Telegraph. There's definitely going to be a lot of development in this King Mountain area. So this roundabout is definitely going to be needed over time. There's been a collision history here. But we need to find this money, so we'll keep looking. Project 15, Northwest Avenue and West Bakerview. Through the IJR that we're doing at West Bakerview and I-5, we discovered that there was a pretty significant collision history here. So we're getting ready to issue an RFQ here this summer to ask for consultant services to help us do a study and find out what we can do here. This will actually tie into some of the stuff going on Northwest and Aldrich and Mahogany as well, so it's pretty timely. And we're showing some study funding here in 2017, and then just listing it as unfunded as a placeholder out here. West Horton Road Phase 2. This is new to the 6-year TIP this year, and the reason it's in here is we got $2.7 million for West Horton Phase 1, and the county got $1 million for Phase 2 for design and engineering and right-of-way, and that's so that they can start setting it up to go after grant funding from state and federal agencies. There was also some mitigation funding to the tune of $1 million for, going to the county, again, from private development as part of development in North Cordata. But there's a lot more money that's needed, so what we're trying to do is work with the county to create an interlocal agreement situation where ultimately someday when we can find all this funding, there's a good chance that this will become a city project, and maybe we can help them with the early phases and get this thing going again, trying to create a partnership that benefits both the city and the county here. Project 17 is James Street. This has been on our 6-year TIP for quite some time. I want to say 6 or 7 years now, and the reason is because it's kind of this middle link between Bakerview and other things going on James Street. We made major improvements to the south part of James Street down here, just north of the Sunset Square Shopping Center 2 years ago. We're going to be working out at James Woodstock intersection this summer. But this section, you just heard from Pete Stark at WTA, they're actually now, in March of 2017, going to be rerouting the Gold Go line, Route 331, that travels up Cornwall and Alabama and Woburn, and then on Sunset it'll go to the Sunset Square now instead of getting on I-5. And they'll go up James Street and then down Telegraph and up Deemer and then East Bellis Fair over to the mall that way instead of using the freeway. So this is actually becoming much more important in terms of figuring out how to get non-motorized facilities on this section of roadway. North James Street is on the 6-year TIP because it's a major regional connection. It's being built by private developers right now with subdivision development. We put it on here. In the event that the road is not completed, we have the ability to go after grants. We can also offer TIF credits when it's on the 6-year TIP. But again, these are things that are in our pedestrian and bicycle master plans. I'll just say, going back to James Street real quick, this one is listed in both the bike and ped plans as a Tier 3, a long-term, but now with transit showing up here, it's becoming a much higher priority to get something going here. And then lastly, on the 6-year TIP is Project 19, the Boulevard Park to Cornwall Avenue Overwater Walkway. This had some federal money associated with it, but the timing was running out, and so this money was reallocated to Granary and Laurel on the waterfront. So this is now an unfunded project at this point. There's been some work done for it, and it remains in the 6-year TIP so that there could be the opportunity to seek some grants. And that's pretty much it. This is the next steps. There's going to be a work session on the 20th, as was mentioned, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have before the public hearing.
Thank you, Chris. Council members, any questions before we move into the public hearing portion? No? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Lillquist.
I had a small question on project number 9, Cordata Safe Route to School. I've heard that there's quite a significant problem with cars backing up on the shoulder and the bike lane as you're queuing to pick up kids for school. Is any part of this project likely to alleviate some of that problem?
No, the project is a Safe Route to School project, and what you're describing is true, parental drop-off and pickup, and we're hoping that if kids can walk and bike to school, there will be less parental pickup and drop-off with vehicles. But you're right, they're lining up on Aldrich. It's not a great situation, and there's not enough space on the site, apparently, to do anything about it, but we do hear about it regularly.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We're going to move into the public hearing portion, and we're going to start again with Deborah Middow and Joff Middow. This time I mean it.
Okay.
That's cute.
I remain Deborah Middaugh. Okay. I would like to speak in favor of tip number 13. It's labeled the quiet zone, but I think of it as safety improvement and getting our railroad crossings up to modern-day safety standards. And I think we should all work towards that goal, and I think it should have a high priority and funding so that everyone who uses all the city streets cross the railroad grades, and we are all affected, and we all know about it when there is an accident. So this is one way we can help prevent some of those terrible tragedies from happening. It's by supporting things like Project 13 and improving our safety standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Jeff Middell?
Thank you, Council. My name is Jeff Middell. I live in the South Hill. The South Hill Neighborhood Association Board supports the enhanced safety measures identified in Project 13, labeled BNFS Railroad Quiet Zones. Completion of this project is a step forward to make all railroad crossings within the city of Bellingham safer by conforming to modern standards of safety. A safer railroad crossing may eventually result in the designation of a FRA-approved quiet zone. The South Hill Neighborhood Association has advocated for improved railroad safety infrastructure additions for Bellingham as our #1 project for the last 4 years. We're glad to see progress made this year. We support steps forward. They are better than no steps at all. Once this new safety infrastructure is complete, this means that 2 of the 5 crossings in what's called the Fairhaven Potential Quiet Zone may have FRA standards and qualify for the federally approved safety zone. As I said, we urge the City of Bellingham and Public Works to keep up this effort. We have been told that there is a plan to do 1 crossing a year until we are complete. That means be 5 years or 12 years or 10 years before we have all quiet crossings. Our vision of this effort is simple and straightforward. We feel great urgency to upgrade the crossings to modern standards for the community's safety after 2 horrific accidents in our history, and to eliminate the need for horns to stop the denigration of our health and our children's health. Thank you for this initial effort.
Thank you, Jeff. Greg?
And I've got a handout for basically what I'm going to be reading. Pass that out. There's 2 sides to it. Greg Hoffenbacher, South Hill, and Jeff and I are representatives on the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission. And we strongly support, as neighborhood representatives, a quiet zone in Bellingham. And this is one step in that process, Project 13. Train horns wake up many Bellingham residents multiple times every night. This isn't just an irritation, it's a serious public health and safety problem and negatively impacts Bellingham's livability and quality of life. Regarding public health, obviously human beings require 5 things to live: food, water, shelter, oxygen, and sleep. According to many sleep and brain studies, interrupted sleep can seriously impact human health. And I've given the URLs there in case you want to go read the study. One study found that reduced sleep time is a greater mortality risk than smoking, high blood pressure, and heart disease. Interrupted sleep impacts attention, memory, mood, quantitative skills, logical reasoning, and even motor dexterity. Another study showed that sleep-deprived students scored lower on tests and found the effect comparable to children who are lacking basic nutrition. And we've got a lot of children in our neighborhood. Successful progressive companies understand that healthy, well-rested employees are better for business. It's so important one company is even paying employees to get enough sleep. So I think companies have figured out that instead of working people 80 hours a week, well-rested, healthy employees are actually better for the bottom line Regarding public safety, the FRA estimates that vehicle and trains collide every 67 minutes, and these are based on 2015 numbers. Cars going around gates, similar to the gates in Bellingham, is a major cause of railroad-related fatalities nationwide. Such an accident at a Bellingham crossing involving an oil train could have devastating consequences and many fatalities. Sleep loss is also a big public safety hazard every day on the road. Drowsiness can slow reaction time as much as drunk driving. Sleep deprivation was a factor in some of the biggest disasters in history. I won't go through those. Loud nighttime industrial train horns noise is not compatible with safe and healthy residential neighborhoods. It's time for Bellingham to restore the waterfront neighborhoods. And again, I won't read the rest of it because I'm out of time, but this has been our #1 priority. So thanks for your support.
Thank you, Greg. Jane Bright, Tim Hostletter, and Charles Dyer.
Good evening. My name is Jane Bright. I live in the Cordata neighborhood, have grandchildren and their parents in lettered streets, and are building a house on South Hill. So I have multiple vantage points where I hear the horns, including Cordata, which was a great surprise. Let me build on some of the comments that have already been mentioned, but my primary focus is public health. And when we first came here, I was surprised at my own reaction to the horns, but the research made it very clear. When you hear a loud noise, the whole point of that loud noise is to make you pay attention, and it triggers the flight or fight response, which then generates a cascade of stress hormones in your body. And over again, those stress hormones and the effects of those stress hormones build up, and that is what causes the high blood pressure, strokes, heart attack in the elderly, wakes you up at night if you're sleeping, even if you think you're sleeping through it. It affects the REMs, it affects the sleep state that you're in, and all of this night after night, day after day accumulates. And as Greg mentioned, some of the most alarming data that I've seen is that children who are repeatedly exposed to these interruptions, they're doing something, and I'll tell my 2-year-old grandson does this all the time. He'll stop what he's doing and say, train. My 3-month-old grandson the other day was trying to get to sleep, and he would startle awake when the horns went by. These effects are real, and they affect our brain, they affect our health. So I thank public health, I thank the mayor, I thank all of you for making this a priority. And my feeling is that we should take this information, this opportunity, and say we have an urgent issue here with public health in the city. We have a large number of people who are affected, and we have this opportunity to do something that increases safety, because if you look at the Federal Rail Authority assessment of the public works work that they did with the changes at the crossing, the safety risk goes down. So it's a safety win, it's a public health win, and it's a livability win. People come here because it's a livable city. It may not be sleepable, but if we make this change, it will be livable. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Good evening. My name is Tim Hostetler. I live at 201 North 34th Street, Seaholm neighborhood. I am on the Seaholm Neighborhood Board, and I am also on the Transportation Commission, so I'm quite used to this document. In fact, a little side note, I was one of the original 9 when the commission was created in 2009, and I must say that 5 of us have stayed on through our entire terms until there's no longer any room left, and we thank the mayor and you for having the others coming in behind us. So I generally, because of my knowledge of the TIP, would say approve it. It's time that it has to go by the end of the month to Olympia and then on to Federal Highways Administration. But I need to add a little bit of information as to what's missing from it. And this is extremely important. It's basically the $50 million proposal by the Bellingham Housing Authority on the old Aloha Motel redevelopment site. It's big, it's just evolving, but my disappointment in broad brushes here to you, the council, is the lack of representation, communication, and actually action from the executive branch. Now that's tough words, but let me give you a little chronology. March 10th, 2015, the planning department had a consultant, and staff was very good with the planning department. They asked the neighborhoods, the various agencies, the housing authority, to come and let the consultant give her opinion as to what she thought of Samish Way. We were standing in Boomer parking lot looking at her right across at the Aloha, and the first thing she said is, any public investment in the Samish Way Urban Village Sub-Area Plan should be within the right-of-way. This is Highway 99. This is what existed before I-5. There needs to be changes now if you would like to see changes in the village concept. There hasn't been anything happen since then. Then the Bellingham Housing Authority came in December, and with their $50 million proposal. In January, they invited the Seahome Neighborhood Board, the York Neighborhood Board to come together, discuss things. I asked at that time, well, how's the communication with the Public Works and Planning? And there was nothing with Public Works. Again, it's the technical aspect of Samish Way itself. February 8th, I commend you. You unanimously approved the use of the property for the Bellingham Housing Authority property. The next day, on the 9th, there was a Transportation Commission meeting, and an agenda item was the Planning Department, and they were giving their transportation element in the draft update. The only thing they had for Samish Way was between 2022 and 2027. So I will end by simply saying that housing is obviously a very important part of this community. We, the general public, the voters, have given the levy monies to you to proceed ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. After Charles, we have Joel Hall and Robert Lane. Thank you, Charles.
Hello, I'm Charles Dyer from I live at 808 East Maple in Seahome neighborhood, and I was sort of brought out of storage because I was one of the people who helped work on the Samish Way Urban Village plan. That plan was a model plan on urban villages for this city. There was a huge amount of effort put into it, both on the part of planning and on the neighborhoods themselves. The general guidelines for urban villages were written along with the Samish Way Urban Village Plan. This is supposed to be our picture of what neighborhood urban village plans should look like. That was passed in 2009. We had a recession, and so not much happened for quite a while, including no transportation development on Samish Way in accordance with the Urban Village Plan, none. It's very problematic for us because now we have a brand new proposal with the Bellingham Housing Authority that frankly they don't know what to do. They are stuck between the Urban Village Plan, the bicycle plan, the pedestrian plan, and none of it is coordinated at this point. What we have instead is, now that the city has taken over the Aloha property, is we have now a blighted piece of property with a chain link fence around it, huge amounts of growth, and the fact is I'm thinking of reporting the city on its own code violations. And I'm not particularly worried about homeless camps or drug deals going on in there because it is so public that everybody sees this as they're driving into town. This is one of the worst things ever coming into Seahome and coming into our city if you're coming in on Samish Way. We need $100,000 in the tip to set up the plan to figure out what transportation work needs to be done on Samish Way in order for the Samish Way Urban Village Plan and the bike plan and the ped plan to work together, and so that BHA can do their work. Even if it's unfunded, it needs to be in the tip now. We need to get after it. We can't hold off on this any longer, and it's not that much at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for coming out of storage. Yeah, they're right. dust it off. Joel and Robert Lane.
Robert Lane, I signed that thing here, you get a moment of silence.
And what about Joel? Is Joel here? Is there anyone else who didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak for this public hearing? Okay, if you could please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Christopher Bruce Diley, and I just wanted to express gratitude that this has even been talked about, because it's been an issue for me, the noise of the railroad trains. I came back up here to Bellingham because down in Mount Vernon, sleeping in my vehicle, the trains were so loud, I was yawning throughout the day. I wasn't getting proper sleep, REM rest at night, and I've got neuropsychiatric manifestations of from Lyme disease that I was diagnosed with many years ago from a tick bite. And the noise can exacerbate psychiatric illness, and so can lack of sleep deprivation. So it's important for me to try and get some sleep somewhere. So I came back up here, and fortunately I found a place where I can hide and sleep in my vehicle, and nobody's closed in on me as of yet. But I spoke with another homeless man recently, and I told him the last time I slept in a tent in Larrabee State Park, I think I paid maybe $25 to sleep in a tent. During the night, sure enough, 2 o'clock, comes a train roaring right past all the tents. And I just lost it. I mean, I let loose, just unleashed a multitude of profanities, and I just had an episode of rage, psychiatric rage. And just a long story short, I told him, I said, I can't even recommend that, because he was trying to look for an alternative, because there's sweeps of homeless camps going on, and he was like, well, maybe I can pay for a thing. I'm like, no, you're going to be woken up by the trains. So I wouldn't even recommend it. And my other point is that all this time that the homeless sleeps are going on of these camps, I held up a sign here last week or so that the housing list has been closed. So I came back up here to Bellingham after I left a while back, because I was also diagnosed with a probable lung cancer diagnosis. And I drove around the western states trying to get established somewhere to get on a housing list, because when I was diagnosed with the lung cancer up here, I was looking at a 3 to 5 year wait for housing. So I thought I could die in a Walmart parking lot or something before I get into a place. So I drove around the western states. It's like this everywhere. So I've just come back here. It's illegal even in California. You can't sleep in your vehicle. The state assembly passed a law basically giving permission to the cities and counties to make it illegal to sleep in your vehicle, and they are cracking down. So they forced me the heck out of California. I got chased back up to here. That's why I'm back. So again, in case I get closed in. Okay, and yeah, my point on this is that, what is my point? I just lost my train of thought. I completely lost my train of thought. I'm trying to find somewhere to sleep. Anyhow, I'm out of time, but thanks. I think you get the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anyone else who cares to speak for this public hearing? No? Okay. Wow. 2 down. Here we go. So let's see. Council members, questions?
I just have a clarifying question.
Councilmember Parker.
It was mentioned a couple times that there had been, I think, 2 horrific or more horrific accidents at the railroad crossing. Do we have a long history of railroad crossing at the one that we're proposing?
Not that I'm aware of at the Bayview site, but we have had vehicle train and vehicle pedestrian accidents in the past.
At that site?
I'm not aware of them at that site. We had them at the north end of Boulevard Park, where we recently put in quiet zone standard crossings, and we had a vehicle train at C Street. We closed C Street, and now C Street is under construction, being improved with quiet zone standard safety measures there.
Councilmember Lilliquist.
Quick question. Will the 1% for the arts requirement apply to any of these projects, or is the funding not going to let that happen? Federal funding.
It's a good question. We have a meeting with community development, I believe, this week to go over projects in the TIP to identify which projects would be eligible for the 1%.
Can you clarify that? Which ones would not be?
Well, the 1% for the arts ordinance, the program that the council adopted, has certain requirements to make a project eligible. It has to be a project over $2 million.
Over $2 million.
It does not include costs that are underground. So, for instance, if we're doing a major utility project and the majority of the expenditures are underground,
You want a statue?
that doesn't qualify. And the other component that is not generally part of the 1% program is resurfacing, so which a maintenance effort. So really, we're looking at corridor projects with new improvements that would be eligible. So we need to go through it. We have several projects like Mahogany, the Granary Laurel, projects that are certainly large enough that I would suspect they'll be candidates for the 1% project.
Wonderful. Council members, any other questions? No? Okay, so again, this will go into a council work session on June 20th, and we will continue that from there. We will take written public testament. If anybody wants to send that in, you have until June 20th when our next work session is. Thank you very much, and everyone for speaking up and sharing your thoughts for that public hearing. And we are going to move to the public hearing for the comprehensive plan. I'm sure that's the star of the evening. We have many people signed up for this public hearing. So, our public hearing for the draft 2016 Bellingham Comprehensive Plan. Staff will provide a brief overview of the draft comprehensive plan prior to receiving public testimony during our hearing. Several City Council Planning Committee work sessions are scheduled from May to August for the Council to review the plan. An additional public hearing and/or work session may be held after the August 8th work session. A staff cover memo and the Planning Commission's findings of fact, conclusions, and recommendations, including the Commission's recommended changes to the plan, are part of the 5/16/16 Committee of the Whole packet. Planning Commission meeting minutes can be found at cob.org/gov, pages, meetings, materials, searching by the meeting's date, January 16 to 4/21/16. And I am going to turn this over to Rick Sepler, our Director of Public Works and Community Development.
Good evening, council members. I'm joined this evening by Senior Planner Lisa Poole, who will be presenting to you in a moment. Council might recall that on May 16th, staff provided an overview briefing on the Planning Commission's recommendation and their recommended update to the comprehensive plan. For the past 2 years, the Planning Commission has held about 20 meetings on the comp plan. Many were well attended and many folks spoke. On the 21st of this year, the Commission voted to recommend approval of the updated plan, and that recommendation is the subject of tonight's public hearing. Substantial public comment has been received on the draft plan. Staff has responded to the comments, and they are included in a comment tracker, which I believe has been provided to Council in their packets, and we continue to update new materials as they come in, and certainly will respond tonight to those that come in through public comment. A portion of the staff presentation will focus on the key issues that have been raised through all of that comment. There are a number of issues that bubble to the top that seem to be real focus, and we'd like to frame those for you before we begin. We respectfully ask Council for time at the end of public testimony to be able to correct the record in terms of facts. If time allows, and perhaps tonight there won't be time allowing, we'd like to respond to the key comments raised. If not, we'll do it at your follow-up sessions. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Lisa, who will provide the staff presentation.
Good evening, Lisa Poole, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. As Rick said, we're here tonight to provide you with a brief overview of the comprehensive plan update, particularly the key issues. We'll also go over what a comprehensive plan is and the scope of the update. So just briefly, what is a comprehensive plan? Well, it's our 20-year vision that includes goals and policies to implement that vision over the next 20 years. And it also guides implementation activities, including our regulations and incentives. And there are 14 State Growth Management Act goals that we must follow when we're updating the plan, and those include sprawl reduction, environmental protection, affordable housing, economic development, and the rest of the goals. And this is our update that we conduct every 8 years. So the scope of the update, this is not an overhaul of the existing plan. We refine the plan to be consistent with all of the factors listed here. New public input, as Rick stated, we had quite a bit of public input. A new format, hopefully it's more concise and readable for folks. We've got 5 focus areas: housing choices and affordability, urban villages, health, sustainability, and innovation. our legacies and strategic commitments that were adopted in 2009, our changes in state law, and that includes airport compatibility and physical activity, and then our new 20-year population employment forecasts that were recently adopted by County Council. So as Rick stated, on April 21st, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the plan with 28 changes, and the bulk of that discussion really focused in on the housing and land use chapters, so I'm going to highlight some of the key issues that were discussed through that process. And the first one was land supply and housing affordability. And there was an assertion that the plan should include more discussion on the impact that land supply has on housing affordability. And staff thinks that the plan does include quite a bit of discussion on this. In the land use chapter, there's a whole section that talks about our land capacity analysis and our urban growth area boundary review. Housing costs are related to many factors, not just the land supply. And increasing land supply through urban growth area expansion doesn't guarantee housing affordability, as the public picks up significant costs when expanding for residential uses. And this is due to the existing infrastructure deficiencies that are located in these areas. So just a little bit more on this topic. So this is a slide that highlights our new residential units permitted in Bellingham from 2004 to 2015. And you'll see that from 2008 to 2012, there was a bit of a, not as much activity going on. It slumped down, and now this shows 2013, 2014, and 2015, things are picking up. So in 2015, we had 755 permits issued. And I wanted to also go over a few points as well related to this, a few numbers. So the estimated capacity in the city has a total of 5,889 new single-family homes, and that's after deductions for critical areas, infrastructure, public facilities, and market factors. Currently, 590 of these units are in pending or approved single-family lots held primarily by 3 developers. About half of these are expected to develop relatively soon at the north end of the Cordata neighborhood. The remainder will likely be built at a slower pace in the King Mountain and Whatcom Falls neighborhoods. 4,169 of these units are in single-family zones inside the city limits, held by about 70 property owners. Lastly, there's capacity for about 1,130 units in the urban growth area in areas zoned for 6 to 10 or 6 to 12 units per acre. And staff assumed 6 units per acre is what they will develop at based on the past patterns. Our next key issue is accessory dwelling units. So the discussion that occurred through the process so far has been that detached accessory dwelling units should not be allowed in single-family zones. And just to give you an idea of what an accessory dwelling unit is, it's a small, self-contained residential unit located on the same lot as an existing home. And that can be attached to that home, or it can be located separate from that home. So the draft comp plan does not state that we will allow detached ADUs in all single-family zones. It states that the ADU ordinance should be updated with several priorities, one of which is to identify appropriate areas for detached ADUs. So detached ADUs may or may not be appropriate for all or some parts of Bellingham, but staff feels that a citywide neighborhood prohibition of detached ADUs may not be appropriate, as some neighborhoods are in support of it, and we need to look at the data and talk with neighborhoods to see where these areas might be. So the ADU ordinance update requires public and legislative processes to make any of these changes. The comp plan just sets the policy foundation. So also related to ADUs is an accurate inventory of existing units. Draft policy H7 in the housing chapter includes as a priority an ADU inventory. We do have an inventory of legal units. That does exist. An exact count of illegal units would be difficult to ascertain for several reasons, logistical reasons, legal reasons, etc. And we are doing enforcement through proactive education with our Town Gown partnership, as well as investigation of complaints and our rental registration and safety inspection program. The next key issue, inclusionary zoning. So there was some discussion through the Planning Commission process that inclusionary zoning would increase housing costs for everyone and should not be included in the comprehensive plan. Currently in the 2006 plan, there are inclusionary zoning policies, and what this does, it just sets up the policy basis for being able to conduct studies to see if this is an appropriate tool for Bellingham. So it's one of many potential tools to increase the supply of affordable housing. And what it does is it would require developers of market rate projects to include a certain percentage of housing for low to moderate income folks, and that's usually for an extended amount of time. The next key issue is transit-oriented development. So the 2006 plan includes transit-oriented development policies actually as a key foundation of our policy framework, and it's part of a centers and corridors approach. And what transit-oriented development is, it's mixed-use development and amenities along our transit routes, and it has many benefits, including improved access to transit and jobs and improved design of the development along those areas. So the plan references the potential to develop overlays for certain high-frequency transit routes, which are our GO lines, connecting urban villages, and determinations of corridors, extent of planning areas, and overlay plans would require public and legislative processes. So the planning area, we feel, would likely not extend past certain parcels or a single block abutting those corridors. And lastly, so those are the key issues, and this is just your tentative council review schedule coming up for all of your work sessions to review the chapters. We've got land use and housing on 620, transportation and capital facilities on 627, environment and economic development in July, as well as design and the pro plan, and then another work session and possibly additional work sessions and even public hearings. And to be determined, a Parks Committee work session on the pro plan and level of service. So we just wanted to provide you with those key issues, just a high-level overview. You have much more information in your packet and online at the website shown here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone have any quick questions before Councilmember Lillquist?
So, Ms. Poole, the issue on the transportation corridors where there's a high-frequency route, what I think some people heard is that we were going to have a half a mile on each side of every transit route was going to be rezoned potentially to a higher density half-mile swaths through the city, which sounds rather drastic. You seem to be suggesting something far narrower than a quarter mile would be appropriate in most places, and the actual width would need to be determined in a process. In other words, by adopting the policy, you don't actually rezone anything yet. Is that accurate? Because there was a lot of concern about that.
Yes, that's correct. And the quarter mile language is sort of a transportation standard for transit-oriented development, but it's context-based as far as what it actually is. Chris Como is here if you'd like to ask more specific questions, but for a community of this size, a quarter mile is not appropriate.
Any other additional questions? No? Okay, we are going to move into the public hearing portion. And our first speakers will be Mary Kay Robinson, Jane Lowry, David Nelson, and Linda Twitchell.
Good evening, Mary Kay Robinson. I'm president of the Whatcom County Association of Realtors this year. 20. That's the number of homes listed today in the MLS under 300,000 in the city of Bellingham. Many of those homes have serious structural issues. 19. That's the number of land listings today in the MLS in Bellingham under an acre with public water and sewer. Many of those lots have steep slopes and require expensive engineering, which puts the cost to build out of reach for most of us. That's it. That's what our clients get to choose from. Recently, an opinion piece in the Bellingham Herald asserted that the millennials prefer housing options close to employment, shops, etc. The implication was to prove that planning for roughly 70% of Bellingham's future housing units in urban villages is correct. There were no statistics or evidence to justify that assertion. In fact, the National Association of Realtors did a survey evaluating generational differences of recent home buyers and sellers. The 2016 survey, that's this year, showed that the percentage of millennials buying in urban or city city areas actually decreased. It found that while millennials may choose to live in an urban area as renters, most do not when they're ready to buy. The median age of millennial homeowner is 30 years old, which is typically when one settles down to marry and raise a family. Even if they wanted to buy their first home with a great walkability score, the need for more space and affordable price pushes their search out to rural areas and smaller cities. I have two of these cases myself right now. Millennials with a young child. One is buying in Cedar Woolley, the other is buying in a rural area outside of Deming. They would love to buy a home in Bellingham, but they want a yard and can't afford Bellingham's steep housing costs. I've heard council members say that supply and demand are not factors in increasing housing costs. Really? A paucity of affordable homes, a lack of buildable land, and tight inventory have nothing to do with costs? It's all because of greedy sellers and landlords? Well, actually, those sellers and landlords are us. We are them. I have yet to come across a seller, maybe one of us in this audience here, who would voluntarily reduce the price of their home because our comp plan calls for more affordable housing. Don't take my word for it, though. This is what Hart Hodges says from the WWU about supply and demand and the housing market. A higher median home price is the sign of strength in our community, but the comment that housing booms do not bring down home prices is incomplete. If demand for housing is increasing because more people are moving to the area and builders try to keep up, therefore increasing supply, one force pushes the price up, the other force pushes the price down. Price depends on which factor is stronger. Supply matters. If we want affordable housing here, we have to let supply increase. The land we have clearly isn't enough. It's time to increase the buildable land supply with increased urban growth boundaries or risk gentrification, a city with extreme wealth and subsidized housing and sprawl in our rural lands. And I made a printout of vacant land and the statistics I just said.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Jane Lowry.
Good evening. My name is Jane Lowry. I have been a resident of the Birchwood neighborhood for 37 years and in my current house for 33 years. I would like to speak against allowing ADUs in the Birchwood neighborhood. We were told years ago that we didn't get to have parks in our neighborhood because we had parks in our backyard. I'd like to keep our parks in our backyards. And there's been a lot of talk tonight about noise. And I know when I'm outside in my yard, I can hear the planes coming into the airport, I can hear the trains, and I can hear the hum from the freeway. Right now, it's not very loud. But if you start tearing out all those trees, all the landscaping, all of that, it's going to get very noisy when we have nothing but hard surfaces. Also, we talk about infilling, and infilling is a great thing in most cases, but if you drive down West Maplewood, which has also come up a lot tonight, you'll find that there's apartment building after apartment building. Those apartment buildings all replaced single-family homes, which were torn down for those apartments to be built. We've done our infilling in our neighborhood, and I'd like to stop at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. David Nelson and Linda Twitchell.
Good evening. I'm David Nelson. I'm a professor of economics at Western Washington University. I've lived in the Bellingham community for 39 years now. Our family owns 2 apartment commercial buildings in Bellingham as well as some undeveloped land within the Bellingham city limits. Between 1990 and 2010, our city's population increased by 28,706 residents to 80,885. This growth is likely to continue in the years ahead. The Washington State Office of Financial Management suggests that we'll have an increase of 16,600 new residents over the next 10 years, which is at least 6,000 households in the city. Where are these people going to live, and what types of housing will best meet their needs? And how can the city accommodate this growth while maintaining the environment and lifestyle that we as citizens of the community enjoy? In order to provide for additional housing within the city, it's my recommendation that the city adopt the following 2 provisions in its revised comprehensive plan. First, any single family zoning in the city with a density less than R10,000 be converted to R10,000. This works out to roughly 4 homes per acre. A lower density than this squanders the limited available developable land and raises the cost per lot of providing new home sites. Number 2, allow the infill toolkit to be used in areas of the city zoned for single family. This allows for a variety of housing types to better meet the diverse needs of Bellingham residents. 1/2 of households in Bellingham are non-family, and 1/3 of households in Bellingham are people living alone. Citywide adoption of the infill toolkit increases the likelihood that a property can be developed to its approved density while still allowing for the protection of critical areas. Adoption of these 2 provisions will help lower the cost of development of new housing in the city, which will help improve housing affordability. Thank you.
Thank you, David. After Linda, we have Jan Brown, John Solnay, and Damian Pravalento. Not sure. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay, Linda Twitchell with the Building Industry Association. The GMA requires an actual analysis of housing data in the comp plan. The Department of Commerce, which oversees comp plan updates, specifically says the housing element must inventory existing housing supply and describe how well it meets current housing needs. This element should ensure a variety of housing types that will meet the needs of all economic segments of the population. I don't see that kind of analysis in the plan. There are a lot of statistics, but for instance, in defense of urban villages, we note that 660 multifamily units were built downtown since 2006, without any comment to the effect that 1/3 of those are subsidized housing, etc. We see a suggestion that we're going to increase the vacancy rate to make it a healthier vacancy rate. The plan quotes a 2-year-old 2014 vacancy rate, but it's the 3.3. Right now, it's closer to 1 point something. It's effectively a 0 vacancy rate. If we don't deal with existing problems and bring that up, how are you ever going to meet the requirements of what's coming? That's the kind of analysis I'm hoping that a plan like this would include. Then there's the basic issue of depending on urban villages, which are apartments and condos, for most of your growth. Most of our growth, according to national studies that we have done lots of testimony on in the last year to the Planning Commission, show that most Americans, millennials to seniors and everybody in between, actually want single-family housing. Okay, but we are relying on urban villages. We are relying on infill that the Planning Commission was told by planning staff is politically inviable in Bellingham. We are relying on our buildable land supply that, again, the Planning Department has testified most of it's affected by wetlands, steep slopes, and other concerns of that sort that make it expensive and difficult to build in. I don't see any analysis of how, for instance, those 3 things are suddenly going to make life better for everybody here. Skip real quick to the end. There are other points to be made, and we will write you more letters, I'm sure. But we would like to alleviate housing programs, to urge you to support a mix of types and sizes. We encourage lenient citywide rules on infill, for instance. Have allowable densities. They don't have to be required, but have allowable densities. Otherwise, how do we face a situation where we want higher density, but none of our neighborhood associations will back it, so where are we? What do we do? We oppose inclusionary zoning as well because evidence shows it doesn't work. It raises the overall cost of housing. And we do urge you to meet with the Planning Commission at some point in this process to hear from them what their concerns were in dealing with all this over the last year.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Jan Brown?
Was Jan here?
No, okay, all right. John?
Yes, John Soini, a lifetime resident of Bellingham, and I'm here today to talk more about the housing need and the housing of the lots in the area. Many of you, I'm sure, have read the Bellingham Herald. That this article was in the paper April 26th of 2016. It says a larger portion of your paycheck goes to rent and a mortgage. and this is one of the areas that I wish to talk about. Realtors have long since supported the idea of more and more choices, all types of choices, lots that it would have for rentals, for condos, for homes, the single-family homes. 65% of the buyers that we talk to in every issue and every survey we've seen require a single-family home. They want privacy. They don't want a big lot necessarily, but they want that privacy. Just 3 hours ago, I got accepted an offer for my daughter and my granddaughter. We couldn't find a home with an ADU in Bellingham that would supply them. I got the acceptance in a home in Snohomish, where my daughter is going to be retiring eventually. They will have their jobs in that area as a result. I've sold 2 other ADUs in Bellingham. If you want to go and look at them on Peabody Street, right off the Fountain District, and you'll see an example of what can be done in a beautiful ADU. As a realtor, we see this need every day of various choices. Every one of you have a different need in your home. I happen to have my home up on Alabama Hill that I made into a 1-bedroom home, a 1,500 square foot 1-bedroom home. It's got all the conveniences that you'd ever hope to have, but we don't need, as a single person and a widower, you don't need a 4 or 5, 6-bedroom home anymore. You need a 1-bedroom or smaller home or over 55 community home. I've watched this in the area. I have another buyer that's looking right today in their dictated terms to me was that they wanted a home that they could find on the water, and they're willing to go up to $2 million and tear the home down to build their own home. We're going all the way from there to my 2 grandkids that had to go all the way out to Deming in order to find a home that they could have, and both of my 2 grandsons are out there and driving 40 miles each day, each way to work. And they're on the highway, obviously, during the process, and that's absolutely dumb in my mind.
30 seconds.
So what we're going to see in the future here, and the decisions you make today, are going to affect families and generations of people for a long time to come. And I'm advocating that we do have some choices of homes that we can make it quality of life and make that quality of life available for them. Thank you for all your help, and thank you for your help.
Thank you, John. After Damien, we will have Catherine Carey, Eric Scott, and Barbara McToy.
Hey, thank you so much for having this opportunity to talk to you guys. Damien Provolenko, and depends on who you ask. I live on Toledo Hill or Puget Hill. Instead of expressing all these various statistics, I thought maybe I would just talk to you as a realtor on the ground level, working with home buyers, a lot of them first-time home buyers, and also a sort of a hybrid realtor, as I have a background in community and environmental planning from the University of Washington, and intern at Issaquah in the mid-1990s as an intern for 2 years. So I definitely understand the importance of planning and the importance of development. And I would love to see the realtors cross the aisles with the planning department and sit down and talk about these hard questions, especially with affordable housing and what people are really looking for. As a realtor for the last 13 years, since 2003, I've never seen anything like this market. It's heartbreaking, but it's also exciting. It's exciting because we're all getting equity wealth. But it's heartbreaking because the dream of achieving a house as a young individual who wants to raise a family here is becoming further and further away to reach it. Case in point, you know, there are 8 homes under $250,000 in Bellingham. I'm not talking about Sudden Valley. I'm not talking about Meridian. I'm just talking about the city proper. Out of those 8 houses, we have one's a manufactured home. We have a rehab house that requires a rehab loan or cash. We have a house that's actually a shop that's converted into an apartment that's not financeable. We have a house right next to a business location on DuPont that's better used as a business. We have a house on Grant Street that's Fannie Mae owned, cash or rehab, financeable only. Wilson Avenue came up on the market 4 days ago. Multiple offers. Started at $225, escalated over $280. Pacific Street came on the market today. By tomorrow, Greg Grant will probably tell me there's about 5 offers on that house.
Seconds.
And finally, Verona, which happens to be more of a single zero lot line home that's tenant occupied. So as you can see, we're in the peak of the market. We've got 8 houses available for under $250,000. Under $300,000, we have 22 homes. I just wanted to end this with condominiums. We have a severe problem with condos. Investors don't want them. We have 262 condos on the market currently. 63 of them under $300,000. Thank you.
Catherine, Eric, then Barbara McTee, and Roger here, maybe?
Hi, you guys can see me okay? All right. Thank you for your time tonight. So my name is Catherine Carey. I am a resident of Bellingham since I've been 4 years old. I moved from Everett, and I grew up here. I graduated from Seaholm High School. There's some other Seaholm High School graduates in the crowd as well. I'm 48 years old. I have 2 children and a grandson. And it's exciting because I'm helping their friends find houses, but I'm also having to go out to Deming, Everson, Blaine, and outskirts of Bellingham where they want to be, where their friends are. I know you guys have children and you have grandchildren that are going to be facing this same issue. I've had one friend of my daughter's for 1.5 years. We've been looking for property for him to buy. He's a hard-working construction worker. He is probably one of the hardest working young men that I have had the opportunity to have in my home, and he can't find anything that he wants in his price range. So I just want to be able to have this conversation, have it open, and have you actually hear what the needs are for these young individuals who are wanting to stay here, and they grew up here. They want to come back. My daughter is in Hawaii. She graduated with honors and has a full-time job, but she wants to come back here. She says, Mom, go tell them we need affordable housing. I want to come back home. So please, I'm just wanting you to understand the need that is in this community so that we can move forward. And I apologize, I'm a little bit emotional about this because it hits really, really close to home for me. My grandson doesn't have a place to live. He's living with his dad's and father's, and I can't provide him a home. It's hard. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Eric Scott, Barbara.
Hello, Eric Scott, Birchwood neighborhood. A few comments on the ADU ordinance proposal to update that. Well, one thing we need to come to terms with is that Bellingham is full. I mean, we can't keep growing forever, and to try to do so will only decrease our quality of life. Usually at the expense of the working class neighborhoods first. The wealthier neighborhoods will be protected long into the future. The reason why we don't have affordable housing first is because we don't have jobs. We don't have the industry up here to support people that can afford their own homes. To try to twist it in any other way, that we don't have enough deforestation, we don't have enough infill, we don't have enough crowding and gentrification is a misleading argument. And it's a profit-driven argument. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend delaying any decision on detached ADUs until a thorough study and count has been taken. This was after myself and fellow neighbors have spent many hours discussing and attending meetings. And we have no pay we're looking forward to for that. So this is simply to protect our neighborhood. We need enforcement of the existing ADU ordinance, owner-occupied and attached and registered. This has been flagrantly ignored in some neighborhoods. Now it sounds like the planning department wants to downplay that and delay that count. The neighborhoods have fought this upzone 30 years ago and had to do so again, I believe, 10 years later. They did not forego the profits and rental income at that time just so that a few neighbors and developers can cash in today. They did so to preserve the quality of life and character of that neighborhood. The majority of residents of the neighborhoods targeted are not here. They do not even know about this issue. Many are unfamiliar with the terminology, such as comp plan, ADU, infill toolkit, incentives. They're completely unaware. Their neighborhood has the appearance of stability. They would not have any reason to think otherwise. Yet they're unaware of the forces conspiring to radically change the zoning to multifamily. Strong language, I know, but this does take advantage of the working class people that cannot be here, or that cannot expend the time and energy to constantly be on guard
30 seconds.
To the financial motives of a few. Many of those people that have multiple homes, multiple rental homes, and now they're looking to profit even further. Allowing detached ADUs will constitute a major upzone, would in effect only happen in the working class neighborhoods that do not have covenants against. And our large backyards are a big asset to the people of Bellingham. Even the local renters benefit by having nearby nice neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Barbara? And then Roger and Bill Geyer and Jeff Crammy.
Hello, I'm Barbara MacTay. I live in the Cornwall neighborhood. I've only been here for 2 years, but my husband and I just love Bellingham. It's a wonderful place. However, if something is zoned single family, you can't go changing that on people. That's my concern. You allow attached ADUs, okay, but I can't see any mechanism for adding detached ADUs in single families without changing zoning totally. And I heard from the first speaker that there are some neighborhoods that actually would want detached ADUs. Is that actually the case? I mean, I can't imagine anybody wanting something in their backyard, in their neighbor's backyard, overwhelming them. It doesn't make any sense, you know. So anyway, I'm against detached ADUs in single-family zoning. That's sabotaging single-family zoning. People want single families because they want a single-family home. We keep hearing that's what people want, and that's what people think they've bought. And I don't think you can change it on them. And this process is, again, most people have no idea you're even talking about making a change to single-family zoning. Most people don't know what an ADU is. Most people don't know what an infill toolkit is. They don't know any of these things, and they don't know this is being discussed over and over and over again. And it doesn't seem to me like it should even be on the agenda. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Roger?
Roger Olmscar, land use consultant. Most of the people that I work for are not builders or developers. They're just ordinary people that want to do something that's a short plat or a conditional use or a variance. Although I do belong to the Building Industry Association because that's the trade professional association that best represents what I do. So I do support the letter that was turned in on May 26th by the BIA. It's a great letter. We could talk all night about these things. Isn't it interesting that this is a hearing on the whole comp plan, yet the only thing people are talking about is housing? And if you saw Sunday's paper, you know, I'm not sure crisis is the right word, but obviously a few thousand people in our community have a crisis in housing. Rental vacancy rates, as has been said, are around 1.5%. They should be about 5% to be normal. And you saw all the information about escalating prices. Supply and demand does work, except in Cuba. So some big picture comments. I think we do need to expand the UGA. We've talked about the South U Street and South Kaitak areas. I think we need to add those. I don't believe that there's 6,000 building sites that would work in our existing UGAs, including the city limits. The South neighborhood, for instance, a lot of vacant land, but hardly any infrastructure. Why not? I'd like to make a couple practical suggestions on the ADU issue. I know a person who just bought a property in the Sunnyland neighborhood, has a house on it, 6,000 square feet. It's zoned multiple residential. They could build an ADU on that, but to do that, they have to apply for a conditional use permit, which triggers a SEPA checklist, and so on. And you're talking about hundreds of dollars, unless you have to hire a consultant like me, and then you're talking a couple $1,000s to go to the hearing examiner to add maybe a 300, 400 square foot unit onto a 6,000 square foot lot 2 blocks from Trader Joe's. Now, that doesn't make any sense. I'd like to see the city start working on those things right now to make more. You talk about infilling. Let's start getting rid of some of the barriers to infilling. And I'm going to write you a letter, and I'm going to cite about 10 of them. I don't think anybody's done that before. So I think talking about single-family neighborhoods, I think we need a middle ground for a project review. Instead of a conditional use permit, let's have a level of administrative review where we don't have to have a public hearing. We can have a neighborhood meeting and let people know what's going on, just give them the information, and then let the staff make a decision. You have that for some things now, but we've got regulatory overkill in a lot of these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Bill Geyer, then Jeff Crammy, Bill Henshaw, and Brian Hockey.
Good evening, council members. My name is Bill Geyer, South Hill resident, 1008 16th Street. Lived in the community for 30 years, and for 40 years I've been a professional planner. I'm certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. So maybe Gene can remember this, maybe not, but May 22, 1969 was when the city then new zoning code adopted 20,000 square foot lots, 5 decades ago. And that still exists today in Birchwood, Whatcom Falls, Samish, South Neighborhood, and Edgemore. You add in the 15,000 square foot areas in the city, there's 6 more locations. You have 16 total locations that have densities that are not accepted as urban densities in other parts of the Puget Sound region. Well, why is that? Because when this ordinance was adopted, there weren't the environmental protections that we since have adopted at the state and local level. For example, since that time, State Environmental Policy Act, Shoreline Management Act revised 3 times, Subdivision Ordinance, our own, at least 3 times revised, the Growth Management Act, our own Critical Areas Ordinance to protect wetlands, slopes, and other environmental features. The plan development process through our zoning code, our utility plans. We have comprehensive plans for water, sewer, stormwater, and our roads. Our neighborhood plans, our urban infill plans, and infill toolkit, as well as the public works development regulations and standards for how you build these things. And our own comp plan has been rewritten 4 times since 1969. But each and every time, the 20,000 square foot lot remains. Meanwhile, the city has increased densities in different neighborhoods such as Sunnyland, Barkley, Cordata, the Puget neighborhood, Fairhaven, Happy Valley, Seaholm, and Fountain District. And so I think it's time that we, instead of having a preferential treatment to a certain limited number of neighborhoods, we look at how we can witness 21st century housing in our community, across the community, to serve the market that you heard about tonight. And I think we can do better. I think it's time to break the stranglehold of the 20,000 square foot density requirement in the neighborhoods that I mentioned, Birchwood, Whatcom Falls, Samish, and Edgemore. And I direct you to page 5 of your land use chapter in your proposed comp plan. It's going to be policy LU3, that's land use 3. And I would request that the council look at structuring language that does 3 things.
30 seconds.
The areas that are currently designated 20,000 square feet density per unit, and even the 15,000s, that 1, you review those to change them to 10,000 square foot per unit to achieve your infill goal. Number 2, that you propose and you allow all infill housing forms there while protecting the environmental features that are in those areas, because the ordinances we have on the books will provide that protection. This is the 5th time the comp plan will be reviewed since 1969. I think we can accomplish this goal this time around, and I thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Jeff, then Bill Henshaw, Brian Hawley, and Carla Stellwager.
Yes, hi. My name is Jeff Quam at 1651 Kelly Road, Bellingham. I took some notes on various people. I think you folks have plenty of stats with you, especially the inventory of areas that are buildable within the city of Bellingham. I want to touch on kind of a personal note. I have 2 kids. I guess they're millennials. One may be just on the border there, but they're going through, I think Catherine had a similar issue. We go through the same situation where our kids now are in the mode for finding a place to live, and so where do you go? And they're having a hard time even finding a place for apartments or condos or duplexes. And I know my daughter works in Bellingham. She found a place in Linden that she's living in right now, so it's not too close to work, but it was something that she could afford. My son, there was a stat by Mary Kay, 20 homes under 30,000. My son just purchased a home. Luckily, it was word of mouth. It happened to be under 300,000, but it was a struggle to find that. And so there's a huge demand out there and not a lot of supply. One other thing, I met with some friends here this last week, was really interesting. She works for the Interfaith Coalition. It's a organization that helps those who are in transition mode or needs emergency shelters. And what she told me was interesting. They have to fundraise to get the money for these housing needs, and she said that it's a huge dilemma. There's the word's on the street that people want to move to Bellingham because there are services available, but the problem is exasperated because there's no place to transition to. One of the solutions, I've heard it from 2 different people, the inventory in Bellingham, there are 20,000 square foot density, RS 20,000, two homes per acre. That needs to be increased to 4 homes per acre, especially in the city of Bellingham.
20 seconds.
So there are some solutions available, and I would say also the infill toolkit would be a great source. And that's all I have for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bill Henshaw, 2653 North Park Drive, Bellingham. I've been reviewing a lot of stuff, your housing plan and housing market analysis and a number of other things. And unfortunately, I think that the staff, because they're isolated and they don't get contact with the outside world, are operating in a never land. They don't really understand what a hot market is, and we have a hot market. I was just looking at the statistic today from the Northwest Multiple, and the inventory in Bellingham this last month went to just two and a half months in inventory in houses that are on the market. That's down from about 3.6. We have to do something different because we've got a crisis here. If you look at your housing market analysis, which You know, in the past 10 years, the median value of homes increased 96%, median rent increased 29%, but I'd guarantee you the new figures will show a whole bunch more than 29%, because the new units that are coming on the market are coming on at $1.75 a square foot, and that's way over what the figures are that you've got in this study. The other thing that you have to recognize is that government is 24% of the cost of housing. So you're creating part of the problem. The other thing that I'd like to point out, and just one other thing quickly, like
30 seconds.
In your adjusted household income by tenure, City of Bellingham, all households, 54% of all people, both renters and homeowners in the City of Bellingham, are between 0 and 80% of adjusted median income, according to the statistic here. We're going to have a situation where quality of life is not going to be available for anybody, because nobody will be able to afford it.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Brian Hawley, Carla Stellwager, and Becky Bruick. Brian passed. Did I get that right? Okay, so Carla?
My name's Carla Stellwagen. Sometimes that N looks like an R. I apologize. I'm the Vice President of the Seahome Neighborhood Association. I serve as our representative to MNAC, the Mayor's Neighborhood Council. And Seahome has been working closely with representatives from many neighborhoods reviewing the comp plan recently. Seahome and York, in particular, share borders with the Samish Urban Village corridor, and we have demographic issues in common. We both have 50% rental properties and 50% homeowners. We appreciate the many hours that city staff and the Planning Commission and Council have invested in reviewing the comp plan. We feel there are many valuable policy statements laid out to guide Bellingham into the future. We all know, we've heard a great deal tonight about how cities are grappling with now to manage a growing population, how to incorporate affordable housing, how to maintain environmental quality of life, and it's very difficult. But it's also difficult to balance the needs of those who've bought into a single-family neighborhood and could now find themselves sharing space with vacation rentals and accessory dwelling units available for rent. Complicating the picture is an uneven playing field, with newer neighborhoods using covenants to mitigate infill development and ADUs. This uneven field places a burden on the older single-family neighborhoods to absorb greater density. We understand greater density is needed in some areas. We understand there will be multiple family housing projects developed. Seahome has demonstrated strong support for the Samish Urban Village. The Bellingham Housing Authority project on the site of the Aloha Motel demonstrates the willingness of our neighborhood to absorb greater density. Referencing Housing Chapter Policy H14, considering the impacts of transportation costs on housing, we are concerned planning for pedestrians and vehicles needs to be addressed in a coordinated plan with the building of the Housing Authority project on Samish. Also, looking at specific language in the comp plan, we would recommend the reference to the chat report be removed because it's out of date. That's the county assessment on affordability. It was written many years ago without input from all elements of the community. Referencing Land Use Policy LU 45, we support the Planning Commission's recommendations to identify appropriate areas for ADUs, improve permitting and enforcement, and to require owner occupancy of ADUs in single-family zones with attached ADUs. We appreciate the Planning Department use of the landlord policy to inventory non-conforming and illegal ADUs, as well as those otherwise present in our neighborhoods. It's the tool I know you've been using. We support the Planning Commission's deletion of language encouraging high-density transportation corridors to be developed near GO lines. And we encourage, wanted that to not happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carla.
I'm
Then we
going
have
home.
Becky, Mimi Oistendahl, and Sean Wheeler and Louise Bjornson. Is there Becky? Are you Becky? Okay.
Hi, so I'm Becky Brunk, and I live at 3209 Illinois Lane. And I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. We moved ourselves here from Colorado a couple of years ago and are in the situation where we could purchase fairly easily, but we're struck with the price of the housing then. Had to do a lot of work to the home that we were able to find to make it something that was viable for our family. And since then, I've begun to work as a realtor in the area. And I think the best way I can illustrate what I'm seeing is, first of all, we talk about this a lot in our meetings, the lack of housing that's available for people that's affordable. But in particular, I have a couple that I'm working with. It's a mother and a daughter. And the mother's 80, the daughter, or 81, the daughter is 60. They're in this situation where they live up in the Birch Bay area, have a lovely home that they'd like to stay in, but they can't because the mother has issues with her knees and can't get up and down the steps very well. And in looking for houses for them, they have already decided they have to look at probably at a manufactured home setting to be able to afford whatever it is that they do. And I was able to pull up 5 things, and they are none of them particularly great options by any stretch of the imagination. They all would require a fair amount of work to be able to be lived in. And you know, these are 2 people who have worked for a very long time. One of them worked at Weyerhaeuser for many, many years, worked till she was 71. Her daughter is now working at a dealership down in Bellingham. They're willing to go anywhere from Bellingham up to Birch Bay. But even in looking that far, it's extremely difficult to find anything that's affordable for them. And it truly is heartbreaking to see 2 people that have worked their whole lives, one of them still working, need to find something that works for them. And the mother was quite frank. She said, I want to find something that my daughter can live in when I'm gone. They depend on her pension right now for the house that they're in. And it's a situation where you have to look at somebody and say, we really don't have many options for you, and we hope this will change. So, as you guys consider this, it really is important to think of the faces, the people that are out there trying to find these options. They're very limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Mimi, Sean, and Louise.
I don't know how to turn it on. Then how does it?
Marie might have to switch that over. I'm not sure if you, yeah.
Aha! It's
All right,
there.
Michael.
All right, I'm going to, I'm Mimi Osterdahl. I live in the Cornwall Park neighborhood. I'm also a realtor. And we're hearing a lot of things, but sometimes pictures speak volumes. So what I took a little bit of time to do is jump in the MLS today, and I looked at Bellingham only. And I wanted to illustrate what's been happening over the last 10 years. This is months of inventory, and we consider it a balanced market is between 4 and 6 months of inventory. And you can see here that since 2010, we have these interesting spikes of lots of inventory. Probably some of that stuff that was coming back on the market from foreclosure and bank releasing. And then ever since then, we've had this steady decline. But we've been sitting in this place since 2013 in this imbalanced market. And currently, here's the numbers. You can see for about 6 months, we're sitting in the 1% range. So here's the last 5 years. I want to hurry up so you can see all this. Yeah, so May, 1.6 months of inventory. April, 1.5 months of inventory. This includes single-family residential. This is not including condos. And this is the last 5 years, so you can see it more up close, what's been happening. Now, there's some talk about the difference between, let's say supply and demand have nothing to do with each other. Really? Here's the exact same chart you just saw in red for the last 5 years of months of inventory, and here's the housing prices. You can see that they are upward. We are almost at a $400,000 median price range for single-family residential in this town. And where are the jobs? So who's buying this stuff is what I questioned. Well, first of all, I'm going to show you another thing. This is interesting. This was an economic forecast seminar that I went to from a national standpoint for lenders. This is the cohort of ages for the millennials. And what it showcases is what's going on. That's my big question. What is going on? This is weird. I've been a realtor for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. You hear it over and over. We have baby boomers, healthy baby boomers still in their homes. We have a housing inventory that was built for them. And now we have this enormous 81 million millennials coming into the market as home buyers.
20 seconds.
They're crossing over. And this has never happened, where we have these two huge demographics crossing over into housing stock that was built for one of them. That's not to mention Gen X in the middle. That's not to mention the aging retirees. This is the problem. It's not imaginary.
Thank you, Mimi. Can you close that up, Michael, maybe?
Here's the tough part.
Now you become the assistant.
Oh, look at that.
Woo-hoo.
We all good? All right.
All you.
Evening, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Sean Wheeler. I'm a resident of the York neighborhood. There's been an ongoing discussion, and I've attended a number of work sessions with the planning department in regard to the ADU and infill. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in our neighborhood and any of the neighborhoods in the cities that don't agree that infill needs to take place. But speaking as a resident of the York neighborhood, there is a massive sense that there's been a breach of trust between the neighborhood and the city. I think we've absorbed upwards of 30% more infill than the planning department had anticipated when they rolled out the rental registration. My house is 110 years old, and it's far from the exception. And our neighborhoods are littered with houses of that age. So historic single-family neighborhood that has kind of been squandered by developers that have come in and subdivided and completely flaunted the boarding house regulation which has been on the books. So while I agree that infill needs to take place, there's pragmatic, common sense ways of doing that. Before that happens, I think it'd be supremely naive to move forward without establishing a true comprehensive assessment of what the density is in these historic single-family neighborhoods. It is frustrating when we are constantly dealing with increased noise, trash, parking, congestion for usage that we weren't zoned or designed for. So just something I'd like to see happen before we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Louise, I know I saw you.
You say something and I appear. How about that? Thank you for your time tonight. I'm Louise Bjornson, and I live in the Birchwood neighborhood. When I was on the city council, I voted for the ADU ordinance after much public input. We voted for attached use. They're more environmentally sound with shared walls. They preserve green space, garden space, play area, and more sunny areas. We voted against detached ADUs in single-family neighborhoods again and again and again. They're not as environmentally sound with no shared walls, less play area, less garden area, less sun, more shade, unusable space, and more impact to the neighbors. Once that soil is paved over, is gone forever. Can you imagine the shock if you come home one day and have a big wall of a detached ADU next to your backyard? Oops, someone changed the rules on you when you weren't looking. You have all of a sudden lost your privacy and that nice sunny backyard. Especially on the narrow lots, the impact is huge. Whether you are a homeowner or a renter, it is not what you expected to happen when you moved to a single-family neighborhood. You expected only one house on a lot. That's what the zoning says. Adding even a few detached ADUs changes the character of the neighborhood, especially if you happen to be the unlucky person with one built next to you. However, some neighborhoods have covenants to protect people from that kind of impact, so it would only happen in the older, unprotected neighborhoods. When this was first proposed, it was only to be in the new neighborhoods, so when people moved into those areas, they would know what to expect. That is a much more fair process with predictability. The Birchwood neighborhood is the lowest income neighborhood in the city, with over 5,000 people without our share of parks and open space, and now we lost our grocery store. Birchwood is the historic Victory Garden neighborhood laid out with long lots that historically provided food during tough times. Areas with good garden space need to be preserved for the future and also for now, since we lost our grocery store. I request that in the housing chapter, page 4, that replace the word existing with the word new. Detached ADUs were originally proposed for only new neighborhoods, a much more fair and predictable process. Page 5, policy H7, the Planning Commission took out the words detached ADUs in single-family neighborhoods. Thank you to the Planning Commission. Page 7, they talked about the chat report. People don't know what it is. It happened a long time ago. We have worked hard to design urban villages downtown with understanding that the density would go there and in multifamily zones. Our older neighborhoods have value. Please treat them as such. I have attached a Senate bill from legislature that provides for preservation of the single-family residential neighborhoods, and I'd like to pass that out.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Okay. Louise is the last person I have signed up on the list, but if there's anyone else who cares to speak, please line up at the dais over here.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davis. I'm against detached ADUs. We live in an older neighborhood. Many of the lots are narrow. We bought when our home, it is zoned single family. We'd like it to stay that way instead of being squeezed in to a more densely populated area with ADUs, detached ADUs around. We live near Western and already have density and parking issues. Lastly, adding that detached ADUs would definitely change the character of our older home area, and our neighborhood would really, I think, suffer from those problems. In essence, it would be a rezone. And what's an added density supposed to go into downtown and urban villages? So I'm asking that you reconsider this ADU situation in the older single-family areas. Thank you.
And please state your name for the record.
My name is Nikki Bailey, South Hill. And I want to thank everybody for working so hard, because these are very, very difficult issues. I just want to reiterate what Nancy and Louise were saying, and that we are certainly against detached ADUs in our single-family neighborhoods. In the newer neighborhoods, we can certainly go ahead and rezone those however, or zone those however they could be coming up. But anyway, I just want to say that it just takes so much compromise between the regulation and the stopping of going forward, and then the people that really want to go forward, they need a little bit of pulling on the reins. So we need each other. So thank you for working so hard to accommodate all of us. So anyway, thank you, and we just are against the single-family detached ADUs.
Thank you, Nikki.
Hi, Christopher Bruce Diley. I do believe that it's a matter of gentrification, not just here in Bellingham, but nationwide. I think that's the root of it, actually, is gentrification. You know, what other explanation could there be? And I think the philosophical background, I think what's behind it is basically it's the definition of socioeconomic eugenics from Nazi Germany, wherein the weak and the unfit were considered an unnecessary burden upon society. I think that was attributed to Margaret Sanger of Planned Parenthood. And that's what I think of. You know, whenever I think of the reason why we've had homelessness just going on and getting worse. And by the way, in 2008, there was a 2 to 3 year wait for housing here in Bellingham. In 2011, it went up to 3 to 5 year wait. And now that I've come back, I can't even get on the list for housing. The waiting list is closed. And yet there's sweeps of people, homeless camps being, you know, forced out of their camps. So where do they go? Where are we supposed to go? Is there going to be a trail of tears that we get forced to Oklahoma, like the Native Americans from Florida? You know, what's going to happen? And what is behind this? Well, what is allowing this? That's my concern is, well, what's allowing this to happen in this country? That people look the other way. And I think it really is. I think it's socioeconomic Darwinism. And, you know, to wax poetic, I think we're burning too much incense to Ayn Rand and Herbert Spencer. You know, and if people remember Herbert Spencer, the grandfather of Darwinism. He believed it was a universal law that poor people should not receive government welfare, nor should they receive private charity. They should be allowed to die off as a natural process. I believe that's what's happening in this country. And when the Nuremberg trials, the German scientists said, when they spoke of eugenics, they said the Americans taught us eugenics. And the American Eugenics Society was formed in the 1920s in California, funded in large part by Rockefeller and Carnegie. So you connect the dots. It's all here. It's our beliefs and our philosophy, and these are the fruits of it. Where we have people we just turn our backs and we neglect them. My brother has a real estate license, and my sister tells me that he has condos in Florida.
30 seconds.
And so he doesn't care. So why doesn't he care about me, his relative? Anyhow, I won't go on about it, but thanks. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Christopher. Dick.
Good evening. Dick Conaboy, South 46th Street here in the Samish neighborhood. I'm the signatory of a group letter that was sent to you. There are about 15 of us from 7 neighborhoods that spoke to density, ADUs, toolkit, the chat report, transit corridors, and incentives. And I want to just say I stand by that letter, and I hope you read it carefully. The last thing that we mentioned in there was incentives, and I was at the meeting that they had with the developers and builders just a week or two ago about incentives. They were explained to them, and all the developers and whatnot were sitting on this side, and then there's surprisingly about 10 or 12 people from the neighborhoods seeing what they wanted to see what was going on. And I joked to a friend, you know, I'd like to see some incentives for the neighborhoods. And then it got me to thinking maybe there's a flip side to this affordability issue, at least when we talk about affordability incentives, and especially for people who in rentals, that it has to do with a living wage. And working for the Washington State minimum wage right now, which is about $9.47, as you know, is effectively peonage. So what should be the criterion about setting a living wage? And I think this is part of a truly comprehensive plan. Mark Levinson, the chief economist for the Service Employees International Union, asked, should it be the level at which produces minimal job loss, or should it be, in the language of the Fair Labor Standards Act, the maintenance of the minimum standard of living necessary for the health, efficiency, and general well-being of workers? Well, I wrote in an article that I put in Northwest Citizens last year, in order to reset the minimum wage to anything near a living wage, it must be raised to about $21 an hour today, which would bring it in line with the purchasing power of the minimum wage represented 4 or 5 decades ago. And in Truth Out, about 4 years ago, a guy wrote, based on consumption growth since 1968, then the minimum wage today would have to be $25.05 to represent the same share of the country's total consumption. Based on the national income growth, the minimum wage should be $22.08. And based on personal income growth, it should be $21.16. So the bottom line here, let's tell the truth. If your business model requires paying peonage wages to make a profit, there's something wrong with your business. And I think that Bellingham needs to take a look at that, as has the city of Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Good evening. I'm Sean Hakestead, architect at Haven Design Workshop. And I just had some important things I thought I'd mention to you guys. One of the things that's really important to me is that you understand what people want. People want a quality of life, and we hear that from all different sides of the story. It's about quality of life. And to me, I think the city's job as a government is to provide and protect life, safety, and welfare. As a local architect that specializes in all housing types, so from single family to apartments to mixed use, a lot of different projects that are a lot of fun to work with, I would like to encourage the council to allow for additional single family residential options on the U Street and North Bellingham areas. The proposed increase of growth through approximately 70% multifamily does not meet the needs of most Bellingham citizens. I think we're hearing that most people want a little bit of a yard or a little bit of something that's theirs, that's personally theirs, they can take care of and make beautiful. It is clear with the growth of Ferndale, which is the 5th fastest city in Washington state in growth, Blaine and Linden, that families are moving to cities that allow for more affordable single-family options. By not allowing for more city-serviced land, you are pushing people away from Bellingham and are increasing traffic, pollution, and sprawl, and in turn decreasing safety, quality of life, and welfare. Even though city planning staff has ignored many facts and statistics that in exchange for good feelings, I propose members of the council review the data supplied by the Realtors Association, the Builders Association, to support affordable family growth within this city. I propose that the City Council amend the proposed comp plan to include the annexation of both the U Street and North Bellingham UGA. In order to allow flexibility for many housing types, it would be good to allow for any building areas to allow for an average of 4 to 8 units per acre, which right now it's about 20,000 square feet per unit, which is about 2 houses per acre. This will allow for a mix of SFR, duplex, townhouse, and small multifamily housing options, providing more affordable housing options for single-family occupant, families, multi-generational housing, and multi-user buildings. Will provide a great option for a great community.
30 seconds.
Thank you. A couple other additional concerns I have is one is the ADU ordinance. Currently, everyone's talking about the ADU options. People are doing ADUs illegally because it costs about $20,000 to get an ADU. It's not feasible. I've had many people just decide to make it a non-use building that's theirs for guests instead of an ADU because of the costs. And then also I want to make sure that we're understanding that the statistics on units in the last 5 years going up is based on specifically on a lot of multifamily and not a lot of single family units. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
My name is David Cunningham. I live in the Birchwood neighborhood on McLeod Road. First of all, I want to acknowledge there have been a lot of statements about the difficulty of housing in Bellingham and how scarce it is, how expensive it has become. And I have no qualms with those statements because I think that's all very clear that we're having housing difficulties. That does not change the fact that how we address those difficulties is going to make a big difference in the quality that people see in Bellingham, not only the existing residents, but the people who will be coming here in the future. My wife and I moved into town from Acreage out in the county about 5 years ago. We were able to buy a house. I'm a vet, so I was able to get a VA loan and buy a house that it took us 14 months of 40-hour weeks to remodel before we could actually move into it, and that's what we could afford. That's how we could afford to move into Bellingham. So it is a problem how much people have to pay for housing. That being said, first of all, I want to say that 35 years ago, I was on the Monterey City Planning Commission, and we passed an ADU ordinance in Monterey. That ordinance required them to be attached units and to be owner-occupied, which is what we have in the city right now. And one of the reasons we did that is because the neighborhood people were very unhappy with the idea of densifying their neighborhoods. And I still have family down in that area, go down regularly. And the city has remained fairly nice because we don't have the detached ADUs there. You don't have big houses in the backyard looking over somebody's backyard. So I don't really see the detached ADUs as being any advantage over attached ADUs. You're not going to be providing any more space for people, any more living units in any way. All you do is make a lower quality of life in those neighborhoods that you could put them in. Secondly, in Birchwood neighborhood, we have these long, narrow lots. If you put a detached ADU at the back of one of these long, narrow lots, you have to then have access to it, which means a driveway down the side. So you're covering way more of the open space and the grass areas, the area where water can percolate down through the soil. And I think that you have to really be careful about where you put those ADUs, the detached ones, if that is ever approved. The last thing I want to say is when we talk about making things affordable by increasing the density, I want you to think about Manhattan. They have increased the density so many times there that we now have 100-story buildings, and it's now one of the most unaffordable places to live in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Come on down, Jack.
Here. Michael, I'll give you the job. Yeah, good evening, Council. Cal Leenstra. I live in Fairhaven. I'm a real estate broker and have been for 48 years, so I'm figuring out how to make it work now. We've all seen this paper just recently, I think it was Sunday, that says, can you buy a house for under $300,000 today? And the answer is increasingly no, as we discovered this evening. Single-family land supply in Bellingham is so short that what few single-family homes are being built are constructed on multifamily zone land. It's nearly impossible to find a buildable lot in Bellingham, and if you do, you'll have to pay probably $150,000 plus for it. It's very difficult to deliver a home for under $300,000 under this scenario. National Association of Realtors research shows that over 80% of home buyers prefer a single-family home versus an apartment or a condo, and they will drive to the hinterlands until they can afford it. This fact is proven by looking at the single-family building permit stats of small cities surrounding Bellingham. For example, in 2011, Linden, with a population of 13,165, issued 89 single-family permits versus 73 for all of Bellingham, with a population of 83,365 then. So on a per capita basis, Linden issued 7.7 times the number of single-family permits issued by Bellingham. In both 2011 and 2012, both Ferndale and Linden issued more permits than Bellingham. And more recently, in the first quarter of 2016, Sudden Valley issued, I think, within 2 of the number of permits as Bellingham. So we've seen that in the January 6, 2015 Herald headline proclaiming county sales up 18% in 2015, and they were pushing the fact that 2,991 homes sold, the most since 2007. That's quite a statement. Unfortunately, many of those sales occurred outside Bellingham. In the Mount Baker area, their sales were up 35.1%. Linden was up 27.6%. Ferndale was up 24.8%. Sudden Valley up 19.4%. And Bellingham up 0.8%. So these stats really say it all, I think. And what is driving this flight to the small cities and the rural areas? It's the lack of buildable single-family land in Bellingham. What we're doing is essentially creating sprawl. Bellingham is the employment center of Whatcom County, yet many people cannot afford to live here. So we are forcing them to drive 30 miles one way, Mount Vernon, to find a single-family home they can afford. This is 180 degrees out of sync with the objectives of the GMA. And the situation is likely to worsen. Why? Because instead of adopting the multi-jurisdictional forecast as recommended by both city and county planning commissions, the city chose the lower forecast, apparently hoping to squeeze the growth that is sure to occur in the existing city and its UGAs.
Thank you, Cal.
Thank you. Am I done?
Yeah. Gave
3
you a
minutes
couple
is not
extra
enough
there.
time.
Yeah.
I'll take my butterfly.
Oh, guess not. Hello, my name is Clayton Petrie, and I thank you for listening to all of us tonight. I live in Bellingham, and I'm currently paying quite a bit over the 30% household income for my 720 square foot home. It's a real challenge for most of us that live here. I don't know how families with children make ends meet. At the presentation given to you, you were told that the comprehensive plan update is not an overhaul of the existing plan, just a minor rewrite, as seen on the scope of update page at the last presentation. I don't agree this is a small update. I believe this is a new comp plan, and it contains very large changes in framework assumptions for Bellingham. If you look at the currently adopted 06 comp plan, you'll see that compared to your new draft proposal, the changes require a complete overhaul with a completely different set of assumptions. Some of the goals and policies remain, but enormous changes to transportation, housing, and land use planning must be adopted. For example, look at Chapter 3, the adopted Chapter 3. You'll find that transportation planning that includes important connections that cannot be completed with your current UGA proposal. If you look in Chapter 2, land use, you'll see that your current comp plan is based on a supply of housing that is 67% apartments and 33% family homes. Your new proposal is an overhaul that changes the supply to more than 78% apartments and less than 22% single family, the opposite of market demand. Just look at the National Association of Realtors study that I've turned into you before, and you can see that the demand for multifamily product is around 16% for all ages and only about 15% for Gen Y, with a demand for 80 to 85% for Gen Y and Gen X. In the land use chapter, you also see that the currently adopted plan is still based on a UJ that contained the entire U Street corridor, King and Queen Mountain areas now annexed, Bear Creek, and the entire Larrabee Springs project. Is it any wonder to you that since the plan was adopted, Bellingham has gone from attracting 62 out of every 100 people moving to Whatcom County to around 33 out of every 100 people, according to a county study that they used for tracking growth. Bellingham hasn't had the land supply the plan is based on since adoption. The same can be said for much of your important jobs-producing lands, which have remained in the unincorporated urban growth area since the now 21-year-old 95 plan was adopted. The point of this letter is you have a lot of work to do to this plan. Bellingham hasn't pulled its growth management weight since the adoption of the 2006 plan, and our falling wages combined with very sharply rising home and rental costs have resulted in a toxic unaffordability in Bellingham that is so bad economic enhancement efforts like TAG are now having difficulty showing companies why they should relocate here. So take a look at this. This is 69 through 2014, and you can see we're falling behind in economics and in home availability. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Okay, so we're going to move to the council questions, and after that, we're going to take a little break before we go into.
We're going to have a work session. Is there a need to even have any questions or even listen to any more?
Actually, that has already been asked. That is a really good question.
Since we're going to have a work session, I think.
If we're going to move to work session, is everyone, Rick Sepler.
Sorry, thank you. We certainly will be able to raise to any questions that were brought forward during testimony tonight in work session and answer any questions council might have between then. I would say, just to be fair, today's Seattle Times has a headline story dealing with housing affordability in a 3-county area, all the cities and all the counties, and it reads very similar to what was testified today. To think that the housing crisis is solely engineered in this room is entirely simplistic. This is a far more complex issue, and this community is committed to trying to find housing solutions. Finding a way to expand urban growth areas without finding a way to pay for it is a disservice to all residents, and if a way can be shown, then you can expand it. So we hope to address that more fully with you as we discuss this in committee.
Council, would everyone be comfortable with holding their questions then till our work session on June 20th? So you have until then, well, I'm sure probably till the end of the process, to submit comments. But if you would like them included before our next discussion, please submit them before June 20th. And we are going to take a 10-minute intermission, and we're going to be back here at 5 to 10, really? Okay. All right, and then we will continue on with our committee meetings. Thank you. And thank you, everyone who participated.
Not so bad.
Is there anyone else we need back in the room? We okay? We don't have legal counsel. Let's not get crazy. You're right, it has been a long night. Call us back to order, and we've got a couple lists here for public comment, but I'm not sure how many people are actually still here. I've got Sean, who said he meant for comp plan. Seth Fleetwood is still not here, or I mean is no longer here. He was, I saw him. And Joseph McDonald. Joseph is here. Pat McKee I do not see, or Chris Delisle. Oh, you're there you are, okay. I was looking out to our vast audience and I did not see you.
My name is Joseph McDonald, and you know I have a speech amendment. The city of Bellingham is in holy war with the false doctrines of Christianity. I would like to remind people that the priests won't go away by ignoring them. Nobody likes the priests, but nobody will process them.
Chris,
It gives
Joseph.
them a license to display their dark message of hate. They might as well be on the front doorsteps of City Hall. This unfortunately reflects the values of the citizens of Bellingham. The priests are a cancer in the community which needs to be eradicated. The Bible-based priests are full of hate and get off on making everybody angry. Every time I see them, I think of the words of a Bob Dylan song that says, "I wish for one moment you could be me, and I can be you. Then you would see what a dragon is to you." I've seen them be mean and cruel to everyone they come across. I think Jesus is ashamed of them. They even promote the fascist Donald Trump for president. I've been asked before, where are your psycho-Christian buddies? I think they are trying to impersonate the mentally ill. People probably think they're doing a good job, which makes me wonder why people buy into and accept their dark message of hate. I personally believe that they are possessed by the devil, and Satan has them wrapped around his little finger. And if they are looking for demons, they should probably look in the mirror. They probably speak in tongues, which if it is a bunch of gibberish and not another language someone else can understand, then it is a satanic counterfeit. There are many things in this world I don't participate in, including tithe and day of worship. But I try not to get down on people that differ from me. It is my hopes that I'm not disagreeable with my disagreement. My fourth grade teacher used to always say, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw rocks. Jesus said in Matthew 7:1, judge not and you should not be judged. I believe relationship is more important than religion, and them priests are very religious. In Jesus' day, they were Pharisees. Thank you, and God bless America while she is still here.
Just as a reminder that a public comment should be kept to things that the city can be relevant and helpful in, or that you're not, but theocracy is not something that is in our domain. Chris, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Christopher Bruce Diley, and just clarifying on the minutes of a city council meeting wherein I objected to Alcoholics Anonymous being court-ordered. The minutes stated I spoke of the religious tone in AA as being harmful, but instead I had spoken of the religious paradoxes in AA being harmful, not merely the religious tone. The religious paradoxes in AA can be spun favorably or unfavorably, depending on who is doing the spinning. As Edmund Charbonnier wrote in Is There a Biblical Metaphysic, quote, the doctrine of the double truth runs through the great bulk of Christian thought, end quote. What I read in Reinhold Niebuhr's, the Serenity Prayer author, Reinhold Niebuhr in The Nature and Destiny of Man, Volume 2, what I got from that was that when there is too much emphasis that's placed on absolutism and perfectionism and not enough on proximity, relativity, and the historical contingencies involved in flux and finiteness, major guilt trips result. AA emphasizes one must let go absolutely, implying one can and does surrender to God absolutely. However, Niebuhr is known for emphasizing the only empirically verified doctrine in Christianity is that one is never entirely free of original sin. This means one cannot let go absolutely. So it's a false teaching in AA. It's their most fundamental teaching. There will always be some degree of self-will remaining in the life of the imperfect. AA says one turns their life and will over to God as we understand Him. Yet, when considering the concept Deus absconditus, that aspect of God wherein God is unknowable by the human mind, it's clear that one cannot turn their life and will over to God as we understand Him. It's impossible in an absolutist sense. So again, it's false teachings that I believe can be really harmful, and this does affect people here in Bellingham because people are being court-ordered to AA on a daily basis. And again, just Reinhold Niebuhr was, that was from The Nature and Destiny of Man, Volume 2, page 35, quote, "Though it is not denied that God remains, despite this revelation, partly Deus absconditus." So that's, that came from Niebuhr in The Nature and Destiny of Man. And I'm a self-avowed pseudo-intellectual. It was really challenging for me to study Niebuhr and figure this stuff out, but I had to because I was so guilt-ridden from 30 years of being involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I really object to AA being court-ordered, and especially Celebrate Recovery being court-ordered because it's even more religiously explicit. And I think more people should be objecting to this, and I may try and get up a petition, perhaps, if I have the wherewithal to do it, which I probably don't, but anyhow. So yeah, Anchorage, Alaska, they put public comment at the end. When I was last up there, that's where I grew up. At the end, I was there till 11:30 at night, and the buses, there were no more buses running, so I had to walk miles to get home.
Thank you,
So by
Chris.
moving public comment, this is what happens.
Thank you, Chris. Seth Fleetwood.
Who?
Just like that, 3 hours later, you're up.
Never heard of the guy.
Hello, Seth Fleetwood, Bellingham.
Good morning.
Yeah. Are you all exhausted? Jeez Louise, I'm impressed. 3 straight. I just wanted to, I was here in the afternoon session here as it relates to greenways, and I know that there's a vote, I think, coming up this evening to formally place that on the ballot. And I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the Greenways Levy 4 Campaign Committee, who, as you know, have been working for some time, putting a proposal together. I want to thank the mayor and the council and the staff that we've worked with. They've all been very professional. You've all been listened to us. I know there's been considerable conversations about the means, the device, the Metropolitan Parks District versus Greenways Levy 4. And as you know, our committee's hope was that regardless of what you chose, that there would be a traditional greenways component. And the mayor's office and the council has supported that, and we're grateful for it. So thankful for your vote this afternoon and the vote this evening. And our group is now free to begin the important part, arguably the more important part of the campaign, which we'll be spending the rest of this year on. So much gratitude. Thank you all.
Thank you, Seth. Okay, and with that, we're going to close public comment, and we are going to move to our committee meetings from this morning. And our first committee is Public Works, Public Safety, and Terry Borneman is the chair.
That was 11 hours ago. No, that was more than that. That was
Feels like a week.
13 hours. That was 13 hours ago. I can't even add and subtract anymore. We had 5 items before our committee this morning. The first was an ordinance amending the Bellingham Municipal Code to repeal BMC 10.30.020 and to adopt a new code section consistent with state law to prohibit the unlawful display or carry of an electronic control device. Currently, the Bellingham Municipal Code prohibits the possession, use, or sale of taser, stun guns, or similar electronic or energy weapons. Recent development in the law have called general prohibitions on the possession of electronic controlled devices into question. State law and the BMC currently make it unlawful to carry or display a weapon in a manner that manifests an intent to intimidate another or warrants the alarm for the safety of other persons. The ordinance would repeal Bellingham's prohibition on the possession, use, or sale of electronic controlled devices. Yeah, I'm willing to quit.
Yeah, no argument
but adopt
there.
a new section modeled after state law that makes it expressly unlawful to carry or display an electronic control device in a manner that manifests an intent to intimidate another or warrants the alarm for safety or other persons. Today was for information only, but we will have the ordinance being brought forward probably our next meeting for further discussion and voting. We had a little bit of a discussion on that today. Some of us still don't agree with it, but understand because of court rulings, probably makes sense to do this. The next item before us was Advanced Life Support ALS Services fees for 2017. The current interlocal agreement for advanced life support services included an ALS service fee schedule for calendar years 2014, 2015, and 2016. Per the provision of Section 5C, the fee for years beyond 2016 is established by recommendations of the mayor and county executive for the respective council. Staff is recommending approval of an increase for the 2017 by 2.5%, which incorporates the Seattle-Tacoma Bremerton CPI inflation adjusted index. There was one recommended change to the addendum, and so the addendum was on page 159. And that under, there's a 2017 revenue increase. It was recommended that we strike revenue and just have it as 2017 increase equals 124,417. And with that change, the committee recommended approval, and I so moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay. We have a motion in front of us to approve the interlocal agreement for advanced life support services, including the addendum. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, the next item was a noise variance request from Public Works Department for Sunset Drive water main replacement. The Public Works Department is requesting 15 non-consecutive nights of variance from the city's noise ordinance for the 2014-2015 water main replacement program projects. The noise variance is requested to maintain compliance with Washington State Department of Transportation permits for construction work within the Interstate 5 limited access area. Additional public benefits for night work on this corridor include traffic relief, worker and public safety, and construction schedule compression. Work will include trenching, water main replacement, milling, and filling of asphalt pavement, erosion control, traffic control, and pavement markings between James Street and Ellis Street on East Sunset Drive. The contract will implement nighttime noise mitigation measures during this work. The committee recommended approval, and I so move.
Second. Any discussion?
Beauty before age.
Okay. We have a motion in front of us for the noise variance request from Public Works Department for Sunset Drive water main replacement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Okay. The next item was an information-only item regarding East Illinois street turning movements restrictions. In support of the city's bicycle master plan, the city installed a trial installation restricting some turning movements at the intersection of East Illinois and James Street and East Illinois and Sunset Drive. The restrictions are intended to provide a positive riding environment for the casual and less confident riders and further development of the city's bikeway network. City staff recommended making the installation permanent to further the policy set forth by the bicycle master plan. This was information only, and it was an item that I had asked that be brought forward because there had been a lot of discussion about this item from the neighborhoods and some questioning about the authority on this. Because the council has authority, takes authority when a street has been, if we're going to close a street, but restricting lanes and others is a power that is administrative, not necessarily legislative. And we wanted to make sure people understood that, so we had this brought forward for an information item. And yeah, it was a good discussion around that today. The last item was a bid award for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, bid number 6B 2016. The Nevada-Kentucky Bike Boulevard project primarily consists of intersections improvements at Cornwall, Kentucky and Young Street to reduce pedestrian exposure, providing a bike turning lane and adding crosswalks. In addition, bike markings from Cornwall to Nevada and along Moore Street will complete a key bike boulevard connection. Additional improvements include a new pedestrian crossing and sidewalk at 24th and Mill Street and the permanent installation of the Illinois lane diverter. Bids were opened on May 26, 2016. The lowest responsive and responsible bid was $387,508.63, inclusive of sales tax by Artisan Pacific, Inc. of Bellingham, Washington. The engineer's estimate was for $406,465, inclusive of any sales tax. The committee recommended approval, and I so moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, this is a comment actually for our Public Works Director, because I've sometimes been maybe an unhappy critic of putting bike lanes along arterials. I really don't think that's the safest option. Sometimes it's a necessary option. What I really want to see is identified long parallel routes that we can put bicycle traffic on, and both this project and the previous one are exactly that. They're long stretches of good road. They're not high traffic, they're not arterials, but they're big enough roads that it's a great place for bike traffic to go. They're not compromised, in other words. This is exactly the sort of thing like to see. So both this project and the previous one are great in that regard.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion in front of us to bid award ES 0512 bicycle and pedestrian improvement bid. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
That's end of committee.
Thank you very much, Terry. And now...
I go home now.
No, you cannot. We're going to move to planning, and Jean Knutson is the chair.
Thank you, Pinky. We had one item. It was the adoption of the 2015 Washington State Building Code with local amendments. We had a report this afternoon from Jim Tinner. He's heard absolutely nothing, as I believe we have not heard anything from the building community, so there was no substantive changes, and this will be brought back next meeting for a vote. Information only, end of committee.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, we're going to move to Committee of the Whole. We had 6 items in front of us today. The first one is Municipal Court Probation Contract through interlocal agreement between the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County pursuant to RCW Chapter 39.34 of the Interlocal Cooperation Act. And this is just to extend our contract for probation. And I so move.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, we have a motion in front of us to approve the municipal court interlocal agreement for probation, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries 6-0. Next item was recommendation for improvements to the city's commercial zoning code. The graduate students from University of Washington's Department of Urban Design and Planning gave a completed analysis of the city's commercial zoning code and intend to present, and they presented their recommendations. They had 6 recommendations, and they focused on 5 major issues that were identified by the focus groups: code complexity, predictability versus flexibility, intent, consistency in process, and a nexus between community and commercial desires. And again, they gave us 6 recommendations. The first 3 might be a little easier for us to achieve, and the other 3 are some pretty heavy lifts, but sounds like they are very, very necessary. So, this wasn't, I guess, provide direction to staff is our call to order. So is it coming back? Sorry, Rick, I guess I should ask for clarity on that.
Yes, the intent would be to come back and talk about work program at your next meeting.
Okay, terrific.
Planning
Thank you.
committee.
Thank you so much. All right. So that was a really interesting presentation in regards to their suggestions. It's getting late. And so I encourage people to go to the committee of the whole and watch that presentation because I thought it was excellent. Next item in for us today was a resolution directing, oh wait, did I miss one? Hold on. Nope, I think I did. Back it up. Okay, discussion of Bellingham City Council ward boundaries. We had a discussion by Peter Raffato and James Erb today about the Bellingham City Charter. The Bellingham City Charter requires a periodic review and, if necessary, a redistricting of the boundaries of city council wards to ensure proportionality of population and registered voters among the wards. The memorandum that accompanies the agenda bill provides more detailed information. So we did have a very quick little presentation on this. The information is in our packet, but this will be coming back for a public hearing. And I don't think we have a date set for that yet, but that will be following shortly. Okay? Next item, a resolution directing the placement of a Greenways 4 property tax levy on the ballot for the November 8, 2016 election. I'm going to read this just as our summary statement. The Greenways 3 property tax levy expires at the end of 2016. Over the last 10 years, it has funded city greenways, open spaces, cities, open space sites, parks, and trails. On 5/16/16, City Council directed staff to prepare a resolution directing the placement of a Greenways 4 property tax levy on the ballot for November 8th, 2016 election. The levy will be for 7 years, beginning in 2017, at a maximum levy rate of 50 cents per thousand of assessed value. It will raise approximately $32 million for the acquisition, development, maintenance, and improvement of city greenways, open space sites, parks, park facilities, and trails. And I encourage everyone to take a look at the wording of the resolution, which is included in our packet. Do we have any amendments, Peter? Is there something you're giving me a look?
So yeah, prior to the vote, you'll want to read, I can do that for you, read the change to the ballot title into the record.
Thank you. If you could, that'd be really great.
Okay, so as was presented earlier, there was a recommended change, and it's on the ballot title language, and I'll start with the paragraph that says "for the purpose," and I'll stop when we get past the change. It'll be for the purpose of funding development, acquisition and maintenance of greenways, open space, parks, park facilities, and trails. This proposition would authorize the city to increase its regular property tax levy by up to 50 cents per thousand of assessed value to renew a greenways levy that expires in 2016, resulting in a total citywide levy not to exceed $2.40 per thousand of assessed value for collection in 2017. And then it goes on from there, but those are the changes.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. We have a resolution in front of us, and I so move.
Second.
Okay, so a resolution directing, discussion? Okay. Good. Good, all right. Resolution directing the placement of a Greenways 4 property tax levy on the ballot for November 8th, 2016. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Good night,
Seth can go home now. Yeah. Sweet dreams. Okay, and the last item in front of us was the proposed ordinance amending the Bellingham Municipal Code. Staff proposes amending BMC 4.84 for disposition of surplus real property to clarify language and more accurately reflect current real estate transaction processes. We had a presentation by Amy Cran, and this was information only. And I believe that, oh no, wait, one more, whoopsie, slipping. The last item in Committee of the Whole was the interlocal jail agreement use agreement proposal by Whatcom County. On May 19th, 2016, the Whatcom County Executive sent a letter to the mayors of Whatcom County cities proposing a 2-year jail facility use agreement. The agreement provides 1, an option for up to 3 additional 2 terms, 2 separate options for inmate services, and 3 fees to be set by Whatcom County following adoption of the county budget. The letter from the Executive Office requests the cities to sign the agreement in advance of July 1st, 2016. We did have some really great discussion. Councilmember Hamill asked some really great questions today as well, and we also realize that this is not perfect. We would like to keep people local, but we are doing the best that we can to accommodate. And we also asked questions about the increase in fees. So this particular was for information only, but this will be coming back to us next meeting. Okay, terrific. So that was the end of committee, and we're going to move on to approval of minutes. I know I have those in the pile somewhere here. So our committee meeting minutes for, where are they? They were for May 16th, right?
The night meeting, you mean?
Wait a minute.
I didn't see
These
any
are
night minutes.
06. I take those back.
Can we, no, I don't think so.
Okay, all right, you know what? We do not have minutes to approve. Let's move on to older new business.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's I know, me too. I read that and it's 06, so it confused me, but I'm on track now. So, Councilmember Knudsen.
This could be whatever, but I think tonight we once again heard the hate words out of Mr. McDonald's mouth. I think there's absolutely no place in this chambers for that. And I talked to Pinky before. She was going to get him to stop, but I can tell you he has a horrible temper. I dealt with that when I was trying to help him with the problem he was having with Humane Society. He was going around with a blowhorn yelling, screaming at people and getting agitated. So I thought it'd be better if anything wasn't said tonight. But I think we need to have somebody talk to him before the next meeting and say what he's saying is we can't spew that up here, and he shouldn't be able to spew that up here either. That's just the way I feel, because I noticed it's getting, yeah, I know you could read the guidelines, but I think we have to be careful. Terry and I learned the hard way by wrapping people out of that area. It can get a little ugly, so I think we need to have somebody speak to the guy before the meeting so that doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Jean.
Yep.
I do feel it's getting elevated.
Yeah, it's getting elevated.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments for older new business? No? Peter? Okay, anyone else? All right, so we are going to move to executive session. We had 4 items in front of us today for executive session. The first one was collective bargaining contract negotiations with IAFF Local 106. Staff provided information on the proposed collective bargaining agreement between the city and IAFF Local 106. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve an agreement with the following general terms: wage increases, 2% January 1st, 2014, 2% January 1st, 2015, 2% January 1st, 2016, 3% January 1st, 2017, and 0.5% July 1st, 2017. Under benefits, the premium contributions for health benefits for our 106 members will remain the same through the end of 2016. Beginning in January 2017, the members will have the option to elect between Regent's 250 plan and the Group Health 200 plan, or the Group Health PPO plan offered by the AWC Trust. The city will also offer members of the option of a high deductible health plan, HDHP, with a health savings account, HSA. Okay.
So move. Second.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us to accept the collective bargaining contract negotiations for IAF F Local 106. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next item in executive session was litigation, AJ et al. Versus City of Bellingham et al. Staff provided information on a litigation matter. At this time, I will entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into a contract for legal services with Christopher Bundy to associate a legal counsel in this case in order to assist the city attorney's office in representing the city and the city defendants.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next item, litigation, U Street Associations et al. Versus Whatcom County et al. Number WWGMHB number 10-2-009C. Staff provided information on a litigation matter for information and discussion only, and no action was taken. Number 4 was litigation, Fred Meyer Stores, Inc., appeal of the MDNS and consolidated permit issues for the Costco project HE14-PL-019. Staff provided information on a litigation matter. At this time, I will entertain a motion to authorize the mayor to execute the First Amendment to the settlement agreement that allows Costco to delay acquiring the necessary right-of-way from the owner of the property on the northeast corner of Arctic Avenue and West Bakerview Road and constructing the improvements in that ROW that include 1, curb, gutter, and sidewalk on the east side of Arctic, and 2, eastbound right-hand turn lane from West Bakerview onto Arctic. B, requires Costco to 1, bond for cost of acquiring the necessary ROW on the corner property and constructing the improvements once the ROW on the property is acquired, and 2, continue good faith efforts to acquire the ROW from the property owner.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion, any discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor of the litigation for Fred Meyer Stores appeal of the consolidated permit for the Costco project. Okay, that's a little abbreviated. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0, and that includes executive session, and we are going to go to the mayor's report.
I didn't have a report tonight, but I wanted to make sure that I thanked you all for supporting the last bargaining agreement we had to carry over. Well, we have one more, but we think it'll settle fast. With firefighters, it's been a long, hard negotiation, and I want to give Brian Heinrich and Casey Luxon kudos for the marvelous job they did, not just on this one, but on all the previous 8 that we've worked on this year, and or last year, and I just think they've done a great job, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that in public.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure the council, we all appreciate the work and the efforts, and we know that's been a long time coming, so thank you very much to your staff for doing so. Okay, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Roxanne here beat me.
Any discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approval 6-0. Okay, and well, okay, that looks like we're woohoo. So thank you all for joining us. We had lots of public comment tonight, and our next council meeting will be June 20th. Until next time, we are adjourned.